About 2 years ago, I fell into the worst depression I've experienced in my adult life so far. I wish I could tell you this was prompted by something poignant or admirable, like personal tragedy or the state of the world, but embarrassingly, it was in fact the result of my making a student short film so terrible that I became completely burnt out and lost all faith in myself as an artist for a while. I came home from England for the summer with my tail between my legs. I didn't know how I was going to face my third and final year of university. I didn't know how to sleep at night. And worst of all, I was no longer sure that the thing I thought I was meant to be doing was actually what I was meant to be doing. During that summer of 2022, decaying in my parents' house, I leaned on simple pleasures: silly horror movies, gin rickeys, and a little television procedural by the name of 911. 911 is a TV drama focused on the lives and exploits of Los Angeles first responders that premiered on Fox in 2018. However, Fox canceled the show in 2023, after which it was picked up by ABC, who produced its 7th season and promptly renewed it for its upcoming 8th. It's technically a Ryan Murphy show, but not in the way that Glee or American Horror Story are Ryan Murphy shows. Murphy was a co-creator and stayed on as an executive producer, but only the other two co-creators, frequent Murphy collaborators Brad Falchuk and Tim Minear, would stay on as writers after the first season. And Minear in particular is the only one of the three who became an actual showrunner for 911. Murphy's influence is most visible in the tone of the show. Unlike a lot of other network procedurals, 911 has a rather snarky, breezy tone.
Yeah, that should be our motto. Who cares?
It's not a very good motto.
Well, not if you take it out of context.
Instead of the gritty realism of something like Law and Order or the chic melodrama of something like Grey's Anatomy, 911 has always had a little twinkle in its eye.
Shark! Shark! A man's been attacked by a shark!
What beach are you on, ma'am?
We're not on the beach, we're on the freeway!
That's not to say that the aforementioned shows have no moments of levity, nor that 911 has no gravitas of its own, but I would say it's heavier on the comedy and camp than many of its contemporaries. That's often what sets it apart. And to some extent, I think that's the Ryan Murphy and Friends effect. But primarily, I think the show stands out for its honestly genius distillation of the appeal of the procedural drama. Most of these shows focus only on one part of the equation, either cops or doctors or lawyers or firefighters. But by focusing on a holistic community of first responders, 911 is able to have the best of all worlds: the spectacle of fire and rescue, the sensational medical mysteries, and the high-octane police pursuits, all with the added novelty of 911 dispatchers, a first responder perspective that's less represented in the world of television. Combine all that with a solid foundation of likable characters, and it's easy to see why this has become a beloved show, both with general primetime audiences and online fandom types. Just from my own personal observation, it seems like 911 has become a lot more popular online in the last couple years, even just in the last few months as the show made the move to ABC. If you're a fan of this show, or a fan of my YouTube channel, you might be surprised to learn that I didn't get into it because of online fandom, shipping, etc. No, I started watching this show because I heard about it on Red Letter Media.
This felt like a big TV show. You ever see commercials for that show called 911? Like,
oh yeah,
where it's like the most ridiculous like circumstances arise.
Yeah.
It's just like we're dealing with the most crazy shit that could possibly happen. And some of those like effects, they look kind of similar in quality.
I was watching this video in my 2022 depression summer and heard Mike mention 911, and they played that clip. And despite their disparaging tone, I thought maybe this is what I need right now, a show that I can really turn my brain off to. And boy, was I right. This was exactly what my tortured mind needed. Sometimes film school has turned your brain into pudding, and you just don't have the energy for Truffaut or Kiarostami. Sometimes you just want to watch two hot firefighters jump into a swimming pool to rescue a guy who's got his head stuck in a microwave. 911 saved me. Not really. It didn't like cure my depression, but it did help me through that summer, and because of that, it holds a very special place in my heart. And pretty much ever since, I've known I wanted to make a video about it. It helped me again this spring when my cat died and I was once again going through it. That's when I got back into the show for the first time in a while and decided it was finally time to start planning said video. R.I.P. Habibi. You would have loved Season 7's 3-part cruise ship disaster special. Today, I want to give you an overview of this show through my eyes. I have kept diligent notes over the years with all of my thoughts, and I'm finally ready to share them. The good, the bad, the characters, the 911 calls, the gay shipping. Yeah, I'll talk about that. I'm not made of stone. I want to express my love for 911 by picking it apart until it's just a pile of 911 crumbs for me to sift through. Only then will I be satisfied. This is probably going to be a little indulgent, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. If you're a returning viewer of this channel, this video might come as a surprise. I haven't said anything about it or hinted at it because I always thought it would be really funny to suddenly drop a 911 deep dive out of nowhere. I thought it would be a weird show to make a big YouTube video about. But honestly, now that the show has gotten more popular online, I'm not sure it'll have the same impact anymore. Like, in the last few months, I've had people independently bring up 911 in my comments, telling me I should make a video about it. So maybe all that secrecy was for nothing, but too late. And for the record, I have been dropping very subtle clues. In my last Teen Wolf video, I made a point of singling out actor Lou Ferrigno Jr. I did that because he now has a recurring role on 911. In my Lifetime Wrong video, I made a point of singling out actress Dee Wallace, who of course has a small but very memorable part in the Lifetime movie The Wrong Mommy.
The right life, the right job, the right mommy. More like the wrong mommy!
I mentioned that she does a lot of TV work these days and showed this screenshot, at the top of which is her credit from 911, where she plays Buck and Maddie's mom. You could have also maybe gleaned some information from my Letterboxd, where I've been logging things like all of the Step Up movies and the J-Lo thriller The Boy Next Door. Both The Boy Next Door and the last 2 Step Up movies star 911 cast member Ryan Guzman.
I will never, ever gonna let you go.
I've been playing this little game on my Patreon where I told my patrons I'm working on a video, but that it's a secret and that they can try to guess if they want. And actually, several of them ended up figuring it out. It was honestly kind of embarrassing. Congratulations to you all, especially Catherine C., who was the first person to get it right. Anyway, it's finally here. Surprise! It's a 911 video. I've given a lot of thought to how I want to structure this. I don't want to go through every season in detail. Instead, I'd like to start by going over all of the characters, and through that, I'll try to give an overview of some of the show's major storylines. This video will surely contain a lot of spoilers, so be aware if you're not trying to spoil the show for yourself, but I am also going to try to give enough context that you can watch this video even if you haven't seen and don't plan to watch 911. And this will also contain some discussion of some of the serious issues and perilous situations that appear on 911, just stuff like general danger and violence and crime. I'll be more specific later if there's anything more intense that I'm going to discuss in more detail, but just so you know, this is a show with a lot of danger and injury and stuff like that, if you're not into that. Finally, fans of the show might be wondering if this video will include a discussion of 911's Texas spin-off, 911 Lone Star, and I'm so sorry, but the answer is no. Not only did the first few episodes not really grab me, but honestly, I'm also on kind of a tight deadline because I wanted to get this video out before, or at least not long after, the premiere of 911 Season 8, and I just didn't end up having time to also watch Lone Star and review that, which is on me. So I guess this isn't an all-encompassing deep dive, and I apologize for that. I do usually like to be as thorough as possible. But to be fair, Lone Star and OG 911 have surprisingly little crossover. There's one crossover episode on Lone Star, and the lead into that on 911 is basically the only time the OG show ever mentions the events of Lone Star.
I'll take all the emergency overtime I can get. Besides, it'll be fun. I've never been to Texas.
So I don't feel like excluding it will really affect my discussion of the OG show at all. Sorry to any fans out there, I'm sure I'll watch it eventually. But without further ado, another video 2 years in the making, let's talk about 911. First of all, in falling in love with 911, I think I've discovered a deeper connection to the type of show 911 is. And before getting into the substance of the show, I'd like to say a bit about that.
911, what's your emergency?
Help me get her some air.
Why don't I just punch it in its face?
Catch all new episodes Wednesdays. And check out our other Fox programs, Empire, Lethal Weapon, and The X-Files.
We need your help, even if we don't trust you.
Only on Fox.
One of the first things that strikes me about 911 and its growing popularity is that this is not a straight-to-streaming series. This is a big network broadcast show, which feels a little anachronistic to the world we're currently inhabiting. For the vast majority of television history, broadcast and cable have been the main sources of televised content. Until very recently, they were the only sources of televised content. But in the last several years, the growth of streaming has absolutely blown traditional platforms out of the water. 2023 marked the first year in which cable and broadcast made up less than half of all American television viewership. Nowadays, people are far more likely to watch TV on Netflix or Hulu or Disney+, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I don't really like that. For years, since high school, I have considered myself someone who doesn't really like TV. You wouldn't know it from my videos, but it's true. I tend to focus more on things like movies and YouTube videos in my spare time. And I've always been particularly disinterested in these big prestige streaming shows. The ones with short seasons and long episodes, the ones that become phenomena that everyone insists you need to watch. I don't care for that kind of thing. I guess when I want an experience like that, I'd rather just watch a movie, and when I want to watch a TV show, I'd rather have something to pass the time, maybe something I can multitask to. I'm not saying this is an entirely rational way to engage with TV, nor am I saying that any of the big prestige shows are bad. I'm sure many of them are very good. I just have trouble finding the motivation to watch them. I can't really explain why. So when I got back into 911 this year, I realized that I don't dislike TV itself, I dislike the current popular model of TV, this streaming moment that we're living through. 911 was like a breath of fresh air. It got me revisiting other network shows I used to like. I got back into Grey's Anatomy, I watched a little Glee for the first time since the 8th grade, I even tried rewatching Nip Tuck, another Ryan Murphy show, which I hadn't watched since I was way too young to watch it. It doesn't hold up. In my opinion, it's kind of a weird, nasty show. I didn't enjoy it. But I feel like I've discovered some secret, even though I haven't. Broadcast TV is still right there where we left it. It's just that a lot of us aren't watching it. From what I've observed in my own life, a lot of young people don't even have a way to watch broadcast or cable. You just have a TV and some kind of streaming attachment. I decided to look up the top viewed broadcast and cable shows of the last year, and it was pretty illuminating. Much of the top 100 are sports and reality TV, which makes sense, but the fiction programming is where it gets interesting for me. The most watched fiction show on broadcast television this past year was a show called Tracker? I've never heard of this. I don't know what this is. I don't know anyone who watches this. When you Google pictures from it, it's just a million promo shots of this guy in the woods, or maybe by a trailer. I guess that's what Tracker does. Look at him. Tracking. I'm sure now I'm gonna get a million comments like, "You've never heard of Tracker? Tracker's my favorite show. How dare you not know CBS's Tracker, you bitch?" But I feel like it shouldn't be too controversial to say that a show like this does not occupy that much space in the pop cultural discourse. The rest of the list is similar. Outside of sports and reality TV, it's largely occupied by other high-concept network procedurals: NCIS, FBI, Chicago Fire, Blue Bloods, Chicago Med, Chicago PD, The Equalizer, NCIS Hawaii, FBI Most Wanted, Fire Country, FBI International, Law & Order SVU, and of course our good friend 911. Seeing as these series are not unpopular, but like I said, seemingly not really relevant in the public consciousness in the same way the average streaming juggernaut is, I'm left with one big question. Who is watching these shows? And from what I can tell, the answer is overwhelmingly old people. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the median age for network primetime viewers this year was 64.4. The median viewing age for Blue Bloods was 73 years. Broadcast channels just aren't really courting younger demographics the way they used to, because the reality of the television industry is that young people are largely watching their TV on streaming. I guess what I'm getting at here is that I'm really fascinated by the forgotten world of broadcast TV. There's this entire medium of entertainment that's slowly but surely becoming obsolete. And yet, I love it. I love watching a show live. I love these reliable, predictable procedurals. I love the pulpy appeal of them. I guess this is one of my most old man opinions. I don't even care that this model of TV might stop existing within my lifetime. I'm going to enjoy it while I can. This isn't an introduction so much as an invocation. Sing, O goddess, the network television exploits of our favorite fictional first responders. Let's talk about the characters. As I mentioned earlier, 911 follows a variety of different first responders. We basically have 3 central locations with their own respective groups of characters. Our primary home base is Station 118 of the LA Fire Department, but we also spend plenty of time at the 911 dispatch call center and the police station, or more frequently the squad car that houses our central cop character. This is largely an ensemble show, but there are characters that get more POV time than others, and I'll try to go through them basically in order of importance in that sense, but also semi-chronologically. I'm going to cover the main characters, then supporting characters, and finally significant others and kids. I'm not going to list literally every recurring character. Sorry if I don't talk about that one detective who shows up sometimes, or some paramedic we've seen once or twice. If they don't play into any major storylines, I probably won't mention them much. So let's go. As far as main characters, I feel like I have to begin with Abby Clark. This might be a controversial place to start. Abby, played by Connie Britton, was basically framed as our protagonist in the first season of the show. The pilot begins with her perspective.
What's your emergency? The first kind of emergency is the one we all have every day.
However, Britton left the show after season 1, so despite having a big presence in that first season, that presence disappears after that, and it results in the first season having a rather different vibe than the rest of the series. I've actually seen a lot of fans say they don't particularly like season 1, and I can understand why. The tone is a little different than the rest of the series. It feels maybe a little more cynical than the subsequent seasons. Like a lot of shows, it seems like they were still ironing out exactly what the tone and mood were going to be. And certain fan favorite characters that would be introduced later in the show are not around yet, so some fans might not like that difference. But I think season 1 is still pretty good. It has a lot of fun 911 calls, and I don't mind Abby as a framing character. I've also seen lots of fans who are not into Abby. Connie Britton definitely has a unique style. She's very much Connie Britton in every role she plays, you know? She has that unique voice.
Eat your nuggets, get some perspective, and get the hell off my line.
But I like her. Abby is our main 911 dispatcher in season 1, so she's our entry point into that world. She also cares for her ailing mother, who has worsening Alzheimer's. Abby ends up hiring this woman Carla as her mother's nurse, and although Abby leaves after season 1, Carla will actually stay on as a recurring character after this. So Abby's big arc in season 1 is caring for her mother, dealing with her mother's illness and how it's kind of put her life on hold, and eventually dealing with her mother's death. Her other big arc is this whirlwind romance with Buck, a much younger firefighter in the 118.
You're the real hero here.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
They have a good time together, and Buck in particular falls very in love with her, but at the end of the season, Abby decides to go travel the world to find herself in the wake of her mother's death. Abby makes one more appearance on the show at the end of season 3 when she and her now fiancé are involved in a train derailment that the 118 responds to.
I used to be a 911 dispatcher.
This is basically just to give Buck closure since he's been very hung up on her since their breakup. We'll get to Buck. Like I said, I don't think Abby is the most popular character, but I have nothing against her. I think she's a welcome presence in season 1. I do kind of agree with other fans that I prefer the status quo of the show in the subsequent seasons, but it's nothing against Abby specifically. One of our other big protagonist-ish characters who actually sticks around is Athena Grant, played by the legendary Angela Bassett. Obviously, Angela Bassett is one of the more famous actors on this show, so she understandably gets a lot of focus and good material, and Athena is definitely one of the most iconic characters. She's a highly competent police sergeant, and she begins the show reeling from the revelation that her husband of many years, Michael, is in fact gay and wants a divorce.
I'm gay.
This is, of course, a big shock to her entire family. She and Michael have 2 kids, May and Harry. I think this is a pretty interesting place to start her story. It brings up a lot of complicated emotions. You know, Athena's not homophobic, but this person that she thought she could trust completely has revealed that on some level, he's not the person she thought she knew. And she can't help but resent him a little bit for what she perceives as him breaking up the family. I'll get to Michael later. I honestly don't love him as a character, but I think they both do some things right and some things wrong in this situation. Ultimately, at the end of the season, Athena starts a relationship with Bobby, the captain of the 118 Firehouse, who I'll get to next, and this becomes Athena's main romance on the show and a big source of drama and storylines for her. They eventually get married. I think Athena is really complex and really human in a lot of ways. One thing I don't love about this show is the way it lionizes the police, and I'll talk about that in much more detail in the bad section, but for now I'll say that Athena is often pretty stubborn in her beliefs and actions, even if they don't always seem like the most just or even ethical positions. This often concerns her job. Like a lot of TV cops, she often bends the rules a little to catch the bad guy, and we're supposed to accept this as awesome and justified. And this bothered me earlier in the show, because the show itself seemed to take her side in most of these situations. There are moments where Athena's dubious actions will be vindicated by the narrative, or maybe she makes a big righteous speech and everyone claps, and that always annoyed me when that would happen.
You are all under arrest, and that means that you are all leaving this plane.
But as the show goes on, the writers actually do start to question her at times, and I really like these moments when Athena is challenged, maybe by her kids or her friends or by Bobby, because it eventually makes her into this character who's flawed in a really realistic, human-feeling way. She often clashes with her teen daughter May, who's more politically progressive than Athena, and while sometimes the show just kind of has Athena condescendingly accept May's feelings, but imply that she isn't willing to consider them.
I know you're still trying to figure things out, figure yourself out. You and I might not always agree on the choice the other makes.
At other times, it seems like Athena genuinely learns from her daughter and recognizes that the times are changing. Even Athena's fiercely independent, cold hard cop persona eventually becomes a flaw as well as an attribute. I really love this argument that she and Bobby have towards the end of season 4, where Bobby tells her that he feels like she's never truly let him into her life.
I'm used to doing things on my own. That's who I am, and you knew that when you married me.
Well, I thought that eventually you would start to trust me more, but now I'm starting to think that you're just going to always keep this wall up and I'm always going to feel like an outsider looking in.
I just love this as a conflict between them. It feels very real to me, like the genuine culmination of the flaws in their relationship up to that point. So while I don't always support Athena as a cop, I do love her as a character, and I appreciate the development and depth the show has cared to give her. She ends up feeling really three-dimensional. Angela Bassett really did do the thing. As for Athena's other big storylines, in season 3, she survives a brutal beating at the hands of a serial rapist she and her colleagues have been trying to capture. In typical Athena fashion, she's quick to say she's fine and reject the idea that she could be traumatized, but of course it ends up coming out in different ways. In season 4, the same attacker kidnaps her young son, Harry, and that causes a lot of drama for Athena and Michael. Athena and Harry's relationship becomes pretty strained afterwards. At the beginning of season 6, Athena returns to her hometown in Florida after her father has a stroke, and this eventually leads to her solving the decades-old kidnapping of her neighbor, which was what initially inspired her to become a cop. And in season 7, she not only survives a cruise ship disaster with her husband, but takes down a Mexican drug cartel that burned her house down. Good for her, I guess.
I'm Mrs. Bobby Nash.
Next we have Mr. Athena Grant, Bobby Nash. Bobby, played by TV veteran Peter Krause, is the captain of the 118. He hails all the way from St. Paul, Minnesota, where I'm from. I love the St. Paul rep. It's so rare to see St. Paul brought up in movies and TV. When people do bring up the Twin Cities, it's usually Minneapolis. No one shows any love to St. Paul.
St. Paul is a city.
If you say so.
The only other thing I can think of is the evil guy in Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt.
You look like Emma Spencer Oakley of 46 Burnham Street, St. Paul, Minnesota, the prettiest girl on the block.
And that's not exactly the best representation of our fair city. Anyway, Bobby was a firefighter in the St. Paul Fire Department. He was also struggling with alcoholism, and tragically, a few years before the events of the show, he inadvertently started a fire in his apartment building that took the lives of 148 people, including his wife and 2 children.
That I murdered my own family.
This is where I killed my girlfriend.
So Bobby has an extremely tragic backstory. Obviously, he blames himself for the accident, but the show does absolve him somewhat. It was Bobby's space heater that started the fire, but people around Bobby make it clear that there were a lot of other factors that resulted in the fire being so devastating.
Cheap, flammable facade materials acted as an accelerant. The sprinklers weren't hooked up.
Then the circuit breaker didn't trip. The water supply failed to supply water. Building alarms with dead batteries and no electrical backup. Dozens of code violations that were overlooked.
But it means he has this great psychological motivation going into the show, where he has resolved to rescue as many people as the amount of people who died in the apartment fire. And when he introduces this, he implies that after he's done with that goal, he will be ready to die.
But 148 lives, I owe at least that much. And then I can go.
So he's really not in a good place when the show begins, and his guilt about his past, as well as his continued sobriety journey, is a source of drama for him throughout the show. Like I said, he starts dating and eventually marries Athena, and that relationship, the relationships he eventually forms with her kids, and of course the found family of the 118, help him out of that dark place as the show goes on. Bobby's also a devout Catholic, and we learn a lot of the exposition about his backstory through his confessions he gives to this priest throughout season 1. I like Bobby. I like his traumatic backstory. I like his folksy Midwestern charm. Peter Krause is actually from Minnesota, so it feels very authentic.
I started going to sleepaway camp when I was 8. I loved it. Camp Ouija Wagon.
Bobby quickly establishes himself as the surrogate dad of the 118. He has very fatherly energy. He develops a particularly close paternal relationship with Buck, who I'll talk about in a second.
I know we got this thing, you call me Pops, and I give you a hard time for being a dumbass kid. We went to a Springsteen concert together.
Generally, he's a very calm, reasonable person. He's cool in a crisis, he's a good mediator, and he loves to cook. He always cooks elaborate meals for the 118. One thing about Bobby, and I don't even consider this a negative, it's just a weird thing, Peter Krause seems to have this habit, this tic, where he's kind of always smiling a little. Even in really serious scenes, he's almost always got this little smirk on his face. It must just be the actor's resting face, but once you start noticing it, you can't stop. In almost any Bobby scene, if you look at his face, he looks like he's about to burst out laughing.
Judging me with that, right there with that smirk on your face.
I can't be mad at this. It's so whimsical. I love his perpetually amused expression. It's part of his charm. Bobby has major drama in season 1 when he relapses and has to be nursed back to health by his fellow firefighters. At the end of season 2, he's almost fired because it turns out the LAFD was not aware of his troubled past in Minnesota, so he has this big dramatic suspension, but is eventually reinstated. In season 3, he's exposed to radiation on a call. The 118 responds to this crashed semi-truck that's caught on fire, and oh no, the truck was carrying huge barrels of nuclear waste.
You were transporting radioactive waste through the middle of downtown Los Angeles?
Which brings up this scary prospect of him potentially being at risk for cancer, but he's basically cleared of any ill effects in the end, so don't worry about it.
My lab results were posted.
And?
Clear across the board.
He almost relapses in season 5 when there's a big scandal concerning one of his firefighters, but he's able to pull it together and keep his sobriety. He has this intense storyline in season 6 where his AA sponsor Wendell suddenly dies in a fire, and Bobby ultimately uncovers this sweeping conspiracy where a high-end rehab facility was purposefully keeping its patients addicted and covering this up via arson. In season 7, in addition to surviving a harrowing disaster when his and Athena's belated honeymoon cruise ship capsizes and sinks in a loose homage to the Poseidon adventure, Bobby encounters a resentful victim of the apartment fire he caused and seemingly becomes suicidal before his and Athena's house is set ablaze by a Mexican drug cartel. I wish I was joking. And this causes Bobby to suffer a near-fatal heart attack. Season 7? Not my favorite season. Evan Buck Buckley is introduced as the baby of the 118. When the show begins, everyone else on the team is in their 40s or 50s, and Buck is in his late 20s. Buck is the resident hothead. He's very reckless and impulsive, but he's also very good at his job. His risks often pay off. He is also a self-diagnosed sex addict at the beginning of the series.
I think I may be a sex addict. Self-diagnosed.
He's briefly fired from the 118 in the pilot episode because he truly could not stop having sex with women while on the job.
It's not 1950 anymore, Buck. We work with women side by side. When you swing your dick around, you disrespect them.
But don't get the ick just yet. This is just the beginning of Buck's long journey to self-actualization. In fact, early on, he starts referring to his various phases of development like software updates.
I don't want to revert back to being Buck 1.0.
Sex addict Buck was only Buck 1.0. By the time he's dated Abby and come of age somewhat, he's Buck 2.0.
I know I'm single Buck again, but I want to be single Buck 2.0.
I don't even know what version we're on at this point. I think learning that he had a secret older brother who died in childhood and that Buck was only conceived as a My Sister's Keeper style savior sibling definitely marks Buck 3.0.
Me Buck 3.0.
Wait, 3? What happened to 2.0?
Drew's leg was crushed by a ladder truck and his girlfriend left him.
Still not sure what inspired the software update.
Maybe when he starts going to therapy in season 4, that's Buck 4.0.
What's your secret?
Therapy.
Getting struck by lightning and being legally dead for 3 minutes in season 6 has gotta be Buck 5.0. And of course, having his bisexual awakening in season 7 clearly marks a new era for Buck, so I'd say at the very least we're on Buck 6.0. Needless to say, Buck is on the receiving end of some of the most intense drama on 911, and the necessary context here is that Buck is basically the fan favorite of this entire show.
I used to float, now I just fall down.
I've also made a series of videos about the show Teen Wolf, and to put this in Teen Wolf terms, I would say what Styles was to Teen Wolf, Buck is to 911. He's everyone's favorite special little boy. Everyone loves him, they baby him, and he is also the object of everyone's queer headcanons. But unlike Styles, those headcanons are mere headcanons no longer. R.I.P. Habibi, you would have loved the Bye Buck storyline. Anyway, it's pretty clear that Buck is also a favorite of the writers. Like I said, he gets a lot of intense drama, and I know it might seem counterintuitive, but I think this is a sign of how much they love him. When you like a character, you give them a lot of trauma and put them in danger, because that's drama, it's growth, it's catharsis. You always hurt the characters you love. While watching the show, I actually started a running joke in my notes called The Perils of Buck. If you don't know, back in the silent cinema days, film serials were very popular. These were little serialized short films, not unlike an early precursor to television, and one of the most popular serials at the time was called The Perils of Pauline. In this serial, our heroine Pauline embarks on all these adventures, but keeps finding herself in perilous situation after perilous situation at the hands of her enemies. Like, oh no, Pauline is trapped in a burning building. Pauline's hot air balloon is going to crash. The water's rising and Pauline is going to drown. Those are all things that have also happened on 911, by the way. But in the spirit of Pauline, our friend Buck has found himself in a great many life-threatening situations, and I've been keeping track. In season 1, he's on a fancy date with Abby when he starts choking, and Abby has no choice but to give him an emergency tracheotomy with a steak knife. At the end of season 2, a bomb that's been planted in the 118's fire engine explodes and tips the truck over, crushing Buck's leg, which results in a long series of surgeries and complications. In season 3, he develops a life-threatening blood clot as a result of his leg injury, leading him to horrifically vomit blood at his own welcome back to work party.
I vomited up blood? At Bobby and Athena's house?
In season 5, he and fellow firefighter Eddie are held hostage at gunpoint by 2 escaped convicts. And of course, as I've already mentioned, in season 6, he's struck by lightning on a call and his heart stops for 3 minutes.
Now I just fall down.
So Buck has really been through it.
Pretty sure we could drop a piano on Buck's head and he wouldn't be able to sue the city for it.
Honestly, knowing this show, they probably will drop a piano on his head at some point. But again, the writers wouldn't put him through all these things if they didn't love him. They clearly love to give him consequential storylines and give the actor a good material to work with. Buck is played by Oliver Stark, who is British.
I don't know why. I mean, I'm born and raised in London.
In hindsight, yeah, Oliver Stark is one of the most British-sounding names I've ever heard, but as someone who doesn't usually watch a lot of behind-the-scenes content from movies and TV, I spent most of my first watch-through of 911 with no idea this guy was British. His accent is really convincing. I think I figured out what it is. He gives it a little bit of like an Eastern twang.
I'm gonna keep on fighting. I get back to where I belong, with my team putting out fake fires like this one.
He's always kind of talking like this, and it's very effective. I feel like most British actors doing American accents just go for the most plain, middle America kind of sound, but by making himself sound vaguely regional, Stark blends in really well. He's great in general. He had been in a couple of things before this, but 911 is definitely his breakout role, and I think he's a great find for this show. He's very intense, which means he does very well with all these wild situations they throw him into. But he's also funny. One of the other big Buck character traits is that he's a grade A himbo.
I'm so confused. Can you start over?
Buck doesn't know a lot.
Look, I don't know a lot.
And this is very endearing. He's just a nice, well-meaning, hot, dumb guy. The best type of guy there is.
Cryptocurrency. If you would have bought back in 2012, you would be set for life by now. I can't believe I missed out on that.
Wow, he really is dumb. He canonically doesn't know what a bassoon is.
Bassoon. First chair. And I was damn good. Memorize, people.
What's a bassoon?
He does occasionally demonstrate encyclopedic knowledge about random topics.
Parasitic breeding cycles rise and fall with them. Only one other person in history has ever been hit by a meteorite, and that was in the 50s. It's even crazier if you know that Jim Abbott was only born with one hand.
There's usually no in-universe explanation for how he knows these things.
Hey, that much exposure to radiation can cause aplastic anemia. Did you know that's what killed Marie Curie?
He's very innocent and naive and vulnerable, which can be both an asset and a flaw for him. Buck is definitely a romantic. He loves love.
Chris drew this?
That one's mine. I misunderstood the assignment.
Part of what makes him such a compelling character is that for all he lacks in book smarts, he seems to have pretty good emotional intelligence, especially as the show goes on. He's good with people, he has a strong sense of right and wrong. Like I said, he has a lot of major storylines. In season 3, following his leg injury, Bobby decides not to let him return to work after the blood clot scare. Buck falls into a depression over this and ultimately decides to sue the city, resulting in a painful lawsuit that turns all of his friends against him.
No, but he filed a stupid lawsuit. Now I can't even talk to you because of it.
I was your only friend. You had one friend.
He gets his job back eventually, but now all his friends hate him. But they forgive him pretty quickly, honestly.
Whatever it takes for you to forgive me, I forgive you.
There is the aforementioned drama with his parents in season 4, learning he was a savior baby.
That's Daniel. He died. He was our brother.
Other than the lightning strike, season 6 also sees Buck becoming a sperm donor for one of his old friends and his wife. I don't care much for this storyline, but I'll go into more detail later. And of course, in season 7, Buck has his first romance with a man, which prompts some self-discovery. And although I don't think they've said the word out loud yet, he is presumably bisexual. He likes men and women.
I'm an ally. Every Pride Month, I put a rainbow on my Instagram.
A lot of Buck's other drama comes from his relationships with his sister Maddie and his best friend Eddie, both of whom I'll get to soon, as well as his various love interests. And like I said earlier, he also has a strong relationship with Bobby, who becomes a father figure to him. Ultimately, I think Buck's fan favorite status is justified. He's a great, complex character that the show has paid a lot of attention to. Next on the 118, we have Henrietta Hen Wilson. Hen is one of the team's paramedics. She is the brains of the operation, I would say.
You could just say the idiotic, reductive, sexist calendar that insults the dignity of this organization and further submit that all firefighters are male.
In addition to having maybe the most common sense of anyone on the team, she has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different subjects, to the extent that she's sometimes our exposition machine during calls that might involve more esoteric knowledge.
That thing is like 10 feet long, its constriction strength is like 50 pounds per square inch.
And she often acts as something of a voice of reason in response to characters like Buck, Eddie, or Hen's best friend on the team, Chimney, who we'll get to next. Hen is exceptional at her job. Her knowledge and passion for medicine is so great that at one point she actually decides to go to medical school and pursue a career as a doctor. But in season 6, she ultimately decides that the 118 is where she belongs, and she wouldn't want to have to leave that behind for this job that would cut even further into her home life. Hen is a lesbian. She's married to her wife Karen, and they have a son together, Denny. She's also close friends with Athena. We often see them hanging out. This show has a tradition of sorts where we occasionally get these episodes called X Character Begins. This started with Hen Begins in season 2, and these episodes show us the origin story of the character in question through flashbacks. They've done this for Hen, Chimney, Bobby, Athena, Eddie, and Buck. In Hen's flashback episode, we learn that she used to work this soulless corporate job that she hated until she was in a situation where she had to save her life coach, which made her realize being an EMT was her calling.
Just fine, thanks to you.
Me?
Starting CPR that quick makes all the difference.
But when Hen first joined the 118, the team was a very hostile boys' club of a place, and their captain at the time was overtly bigoted, so Hen struggled a lot to prove herself and make herself heard.
That's the women's locker room. Don't mind the ping pong table. We'll move it out in a week if you're still here.
So she's really fought hard to be where she is. She's overcome a lot of adversity. She's very complex too. Even though she's not generally a reckless character like Buck, it seems like she also sometimes does things impulsively. And this can be good because she usually has good instincts, like in season 7 when she disobeys orders and trusts her gut to go find Athena and Bobby's missing cruise ship. But it can also be not so good. In season 1, she actually cheats on her wife. There's this dramatic part of Hen's backstory where her first love was this tempestuous woman, Eva, with a drug problem, who has been in prison for some time, but is released in season 1 when she reconnects with Hen. And yeah, Hen cheats on Karen with her ex. A lot of fans kind of choose to pretend this isn't canon because it's a really weird, unfortunate detail in what is otherwise a pretty nice relationship between Hen and Karen. Like I said, season 1 is kind of a different vibe, and later on in the show, it's hard to understand how the Hen we've come to know would do that. But on the whole, I like Hen. She's an essential part of the dynamic of the show. I love her friendship with Chimney. I think she has a strong backstory, and I actually love her relationship with her mom. Hen's mom, Tony, is introduced in season 4, and right away, Hen and her mom are styled basically exactly the same. They have the same hair, the same glasses, they wear similar clothes. I thought that was a really cute detail. As far as other big Hen storylines, in season 3, she accidentally fatally hits a driver with the fire engine, which obviously causes her a lot of pain and guilt, but she's ultimately cleared.
Her light never changed. Looks like it was the circuit board on the street lamp.
Her medical school arc is a big one. Before she quits in season 6, she has plenty of drama with juggling work and school. Her and Karen's son, Denny, is actually her ex, Eva's biological child, so that results in occasional drama, like when Eva decides to move away permanently in season 5, and when Denny's biological father wants a bigger part in his life in season 6. And throughout the show, Hen and Karen are on this journey to possibly have more kids. They unsuccessfully try IVF in season 3, and eventually decide to become foster parents. In season 7, Hen and Karen take in a traumatized foster child, whom they come to really love, but she's suddenly taken away from them by an evil city councilwoman for being at the scene when her drunk driving son refused treatment and later died of a brain aneurysm. Again, season 7, not my favorite, but that's Hen. I love this actress, Aisha Hines. She's been around for a long time in a lot of things, but I think this is one of her first big main cast TV roles, so I'm glad the show gives her a lot to work with because she always does great. Next is Hen's bestie, Howard Chimney Hahn. You might be wondering why he's nicknamed Chimney, but this is actually one of the great mysteries of 911.
Your dad ever tell you why we call him Chimney?
It's become a running joke that no one ever explains why he's called Chimney, but they always imply that it's something really weird or embarrassing.
Actually, nobody calls me that. It's Chimney.
I bet there's a story there.
Not one you could tell on TV.
It's possible they'll reveal it one day, but I think it's far more likely that we never find out. I think explaining it would kind of ruin the joke. Anyway, Chimney is the other paramedic on the 118. He has been at the fire station the longest of any of the current firefighters. In his Begins episode, we see that he used to be sort of aimless. He worked at a karaoke bar with his friend and surrogate brother Kevin, and similarly to Hen, he wasn't sure what his purpose in life was.
Seriously, shouldn't I have, by now had some kind of moment where I felt like, yeah, this is it. This is the thing I'm supposed to do.
But then there was a fire at the bar where he kept his cool and managed to evacuate everyone, after which he realized that not only was he naturally good at this, but he loved the feeling of being a hero. Both he and Kevin become firefighters, but Kevin ended up dying in a fire they were both responding to, which kind of sobered Chimney up and made him take the job more seriously. Chimney is also basically the unofficial adoptive son of Kevin's parents, the Lees, because his father moved back to Korea when Chimney was a child and was barely in his life after that, and when Chimney was a teenager, his mother died of cancer, so the Lees filled that role for him for most of his life. If it's not already clear, I love Chimney. I think he's one of the best characters on this show by far. He's so fully realized, he goes through so much genuine growth throughout the show, he's often the funniest character, and he's such a good person inherently. Personality-wise, Chimney is goofy, but also kind of high-strung. He's a worrier, he spirals easily, he's very superstitious, and he can be insecure. In the first season, he's dating this woman because she likes firefighters, but he's not being honest about himself at all. He lies to her that he sees more action on the job than he actually does. He lies that he's cooking for her when really it's food Bobby has prepared. There's nothing authentic about this relationship, and he proposes to her to try and attain this life he feels like he should have, but she says no because she knows they're not actually that well matched. Then he has this life-changing injury where he's involved in a car accident and gets a piece of rebar impaled through his skull. He miraculously survives this with seemingly no long-term health effects at all.
34 years in neurology, I have never seen anything like it. You're a modern medical miracle.
But this prompts him to reconsider his life a little. Speaking of which, if there's one character who can give Buck a run for his money in terms of life-threatening incidents survived, it's Chimney. Just about every character on the show has a major medical emergency at some point, but just like Buck, Chimney in particular has been through the ringer. In season 1, he gets the rebar stuck in his head. In season 2, he gets stabbed by Buck's sister Maddie's abusive ex-husband. In season 5, he has his heart stopped and restarted multiple times by a crazed firefighter turned serial killer. He's impaled by shrapnel in the season 6 finale, and in season 7, he contracts life-threatening bacterial encephalitis on his wedding day.
Because every significant moment in our lives happens in a hospital.
But again, if anything, I think that's a sign the writers like him. It means they want to give him intense drama. They want to make other characters fret over him. In season 2, Chimney meets Buck's sister Maddie, and they immediately hit it off, leading to maybe the best romance on the show so far. I love Chimney and Maddie. I'll say more when I discuss Maddie in a minute, but I love that they connected right away. I love how sweet they are to each other. I love all the dramatic obstacles they've overcome. I love how dorky they are together. They both have theater kid energy, and that explains a lot. They eventually even have a baby named Ji-yeon after Chimney's mom. Chimney is played by Kenneth Choi, who's been around as kind of a character actor in a ton of stuff. You might have seen him in some superhero movies, some other Ryan Murphy projects like American Crime Story. I didn't realize until this year that he played Terry Schuster's OBGYN on Glee. Even if he wasn't on 911, this would be enough to make him celebrity material in my book. But similarly to Aisha Hines, him having mostly played supporting roles for much of his career makes me all the happier that he's finally getting a leading man kind of part on 911. He's not the main character since this is such an ensemble show, but he's one of the leads and he gets all this great drama and growth. I think he has maybe the best character development in the entire show. His growth from seasons 1 to 2 is so consistent and emotional and well thought out. He gets to marry Jennifer Love Hewitt, living my dream. Earlier this year, when I was briefly active in the 911 subreddit, I saw a series of polls where people were trying to figure out who the most popular character on the show is. And when I saw the first few rounds, I thought this was kind of ridiculous because I just assumed that it was obviously going to be Buck. So much of the fandom attention is focused on Buck. But to my surprise, the winner was actually Chimney. So I guess I underestimated just how beloved of a character he is. Deserved. I love you, Chimney. One of the main characters introduced in season 2 is Buck's older sister, Maddie Buckley, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt. Maddie comes to California to seek out Buck after leaving her abusive husband, Doug, whom she had been married to for a long time. I think they got married fresh out of high school. Doug was extremely mentally and physically abusive, but Maddie finally made it out and fled to California, knowing that he might try to track her down, which he eventually does later on in season 2. This culminates in a very dramatic episode where Doug stabs Chimney, kidnaps Maddie, and after a long struggle, Maddie kills Doug. Obviously, the trauma of this and of her entire marriage to Doug is a big part of Maddie's journey throughout the show. Bizarrely, Doug is played by Jennifer Love Hewitt's real-life husband, Brian Hallisey. I've always wondered why they would choose to do that, but to be fair, I recently saw this clip of Jennifer Love Hewitt discussing it on the Drew Barrymore show, and she mentions that having Doug be played by someone that she trusted made those intense scenes easier.
It was nice because we had to do some really scary scenes, and we obviously trust each other so much that it made it really nice that it was him.
So actually I can see that. I hadn't thought about it that way. Anyway, when Maddie is introduced, she kind of functions like a replacement for Abby. Obviously she's Buck's sister, not his love interest, but she becomes a 911 dispatcher, so she fills that role as our main call center POV, as well as being this loved one for Buck to seek advice from and worry about, and vice versa. This show made me realize how much I love Jennifer Love Hewitt. I hadn't seen her in that much outside of this. I've seen some of her big movies, but I'd never seen her other TV work or anything. She is just such a pro. She knows exactly what she's doing. I feel like she's in a similar position to Angela Bassett on this show as these two heavy-hitter film actresses who are kind of gracing 911 with their presence. And similarly to Bassett, it seems like the show gives her a lot of good material to keep things fresh for her. One thing about Maddie, she is always crying. She's a pro crier. The show also loves to let her sing. Hewitt is a singer. She used to have a bona fide music career, and 911 never passes up an opportunity to show this off.
Where there is love, I'll be there.
And everyone clapped. I love this. I could see this being annoying if it was an actor I didn't like or whose singing I didn't like, but Hewitt is genuinely talented, and this is a ridiculous enough show that Maddie's singing sometimes doesn't feel out of place. This is coming to us from the freaks who brought us Glee, after all. It's also one of the things Maddie and Chimney connect on.
Islands in the stream, that is what we are.
Their song is Islands in the Stream, and in their wedding episode in season 7, they play an emotional, stripped-down cover by Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown.
Again, they have former theater kid energy. That's something I love about Maddie. Once you get beneath the surface of all the trauma she's endured, once she feels safe enough to be herself, she's actually this silly, fun-loving person, and I think that's sweet. I like her and Buck's relationship. She's almost like both a sibling and a parent to him, since their actual parents were so absent, and she's quite a bit older than him, so that gives them an interesting dynamic. We get more context for their relationship and how close they've grown in the Buck Begins episode. In addition to Doug's death and falling in love with Chimney, one of her most dramatic storylines comes in season 5, when she starts suffering from severe postpartum depression. After a scare with Ji-yeon, she decides to leave town for a while to try to seek help. In real life, this was a result of Hewitt herself going on maternity leave. I've seen some fans say they don't like this part of season 5, presumably because it's a big status quo change for Maddie to be gone for a while, and Chimney eventually leaves to go find her, so he's absent for a while too. But honestly, I think this is the best they could have done to write Maddie off the show for a while during Hewitt's absence. She had to leave for one reason or another, and as much as fans may have wanted something less traumatic, A, this is a TV show. It doesn't exist to have all the characters be happy and healthy all the time. And B, like I said before, Hewitt is a great actress and a major asset to this show. If you're Jennifer Love Hewitt, you probably want a storyline that's going to give you the chance to flex your muscles as an actress. So I'm glad both she and Kenny Choi got to really show off what they could do in this storyline. Finally, Maddie and Chimney have their engagement and marriage arc. They get audited for accidental tax fraud and realize that they could save money by marrying, which makes Chimney reassess why they aren't married in the first place. He buys an engagement ring, which leads to a protracted comedy of errors where he loses the ring, goes on a wild goose chase for it, and finally Ji-yeon and Maddie find it by chance, and after some soul searching, Maddie decides to propose to Chimney.
Howard Hahn, will you marry us?
Their wedding episode in season 7 is kind of marred by Chimney contracting the aforementioned encephalitis, but I'll get to my hatred of season 7 later. I love Maddie, nothing but respect for my queen, Jennifer Love Hewitt. Finally, our last main cast member, also introduced in season 2, is rookie firefighter Eddie Diaz. Eddie is an Army vet recently relocated to California from Texas. He's first introduced as something of a rival to Buck, who's jealous of his hot bod and supermodel looks. It's, you know, it's...
You can have my back any day. Yeah. Or, you know, you could have mine.
Which could mean nothing. Eddie is nice. He's cool, normal, not a lot going on, honestly. He has a young son, Christopher. Christopher has cerebral palsy, and he's a really cute kid. Love Christopher. Eddie's estranged from his wife Shannon, Christopher's mother. She left him at some point in the recent past, but the details aren't super clear in Eddie's first season. Here's the thing. I've been pretty much raving about every character, right? Generally, I think the writing on this show is really solid. Every character has a lot going on, really good characterization, and then you have Eddie. I don't hate Eddie. In fact, there are some things about Eddie and some things involving Eddie that I like. However, this may be controversial, but I think Eddie is the worst written character on this show. It just seems like they didn't think of much to give him when they first introduced him. I feel like maybe they set themselves up for failure in this very first episode of the season by creating this dynamic where Buck is jealous of Eddie for being so great. Because as much as I like watching Buck get all hot and bothered, wondering why this beautiful man makes him so angry, this kind of necessitates Eddie being perfect, right? They have to set him up as really cool and nice and talented and well-adjusted, because why else would Buck be jealous? So right off the bat, it seems like they kind of forgot to give him any relatable flaws. As the show goes on, it seems like they did not plan for Eddie at all. Not only do we still barely know anything about his personality or his interests, but whenever Eddie gets an emotional storyline, it feels like it comes out of nowhere. In season 3, they suddenly give him anger issues and have him join a fight club, and by suddenly, I mean he never shows any signs of having anger issues until the show decides to have him get into a fight and assault a guy and go to jail. Why was there no setup for Eddie feeling that way? In season 5, they suddenly give him PTSD, and by suddenly, I mean he never shows any signs of having PTSD until the show decides to give him an emotional breakdown out of nowhere. It's just not set up consistently the way it would be for any other character on the show. When I said I liked that argument between Athena and Bobby from the end of season 4, the reason I like it is that it feels like the natural result of the buildup of tension in their relationship that we've seen throughout the show. Eddie's more dramatic behavior on the show almost always feels like a non sequitur. He'll be whatever the show needs him to be in any given storyline. We know so little about him. I don't know who Eddie is. Most of the time, he feels like a blank slate. You know how in my Teen Wolf video, I called Scott McCall a mild block of cheese? Fun fact, I originally came up with that line to describe Eddie Diaz. You can tell they had no plan for Eddie because in season 2, his first season on the show, after some drama throughout the season between Eddie and his estranged wife Shannon, the show just unceremoniously kills her off in a freak accident in what is clearly a vain, cheap attempt to give Eddie some depth. Are you guys familiar with the concept of fridging? This was conceived by Gail Simone to describe female comic book characters being cruelly killed off, depowered, or otherwise attacked for the sake of a cheap man-pain plot device. Simone was inspired by this plot point in Green Lantern: A New Dawn, where the protagonist's girlfriend is murdered and stuffed into a refrigerator. You know, so that guy could be sad. As much as I typically like the writing on 911, Shannon's death feels incredibly cheap and unnecessary. The most classic example of fridging I've ever seen in the wild. And the writers barely even do anything with it. She dies in a car accident the 118 responds to, Eddie does a sad walk through the hospital in slow motion, and then by the next episode, it might as well have never happened. Eddie and Christopher are at the funeral reception, and they're both just acting totally fine. What was the thought process here?
He was so brave yesterday at the funeral.
What's more, you can tell they regretted this decision pretty immediately after going through with it, because for the next 5 seasons, yes, right up into the most recent season, they can't stop bringing back Shannon. A flashback episode showing Eddie and Shannon's life together, a storyline where Eddie still isn't over Shannon, a storyline in the most recent season where Eddie, apparently still not over Shannon, becomes obsessed with a doppelganger of Shannon.
I mean, if I didn't know better, even I'd say this was me.
I wish I was joking. In an apparent homage to Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, Eddie, now dating another woman, meets and starts dating a woman who happens to look exactly like Shannon. Don't talk to me about season 7. It's not good for my health. But I mean, if this doesn't say no plan to you, I don't know what does. He's just all over the place. There's no coherent linear arc to Eddie. It's especially apparent in contrast to all the other characters who mostly have good, measured development. I see a lot of potential in Eddie, but I think you'd have to be a very skilled writer and make some very specific decisions to get this whole thing back on track. More on that later. But again, I don't hate Eddie. I think he's very good looking. I like his friendship with Buck. That's one of his defining emotional through lines on the show, and I like their dynamic. Sue me. Like I said, I also love Eddie's son, Christopher. He's a really cute kid, but I also have to say, having a cute kid is not in itself a personality trait, contrary to what the show would have you believe. I like the brief snippets we get of Eddie's personality. They're few and far between, but when it really comes down to it, Eddie's kind of sassy at times.
So is a Hex and a Chris the same thing?
By that you mean both are totally made up and not real?
Yes.
Especially in contrast with Buck. Like I said, Buck is really innocent and chipper and romantic, whereas Eddie is kind of snarkier and more cynical.
She's got a reservoir of Catholic guilt, just lying dormant, waiting to be activated. Like sea monkeys. No.
But I also like that when they're paired up, which they often are by the show, Eddie isn't just the smart one or something. They're usually both pretty dumb together. Eddie's a skeptic, where someone like Chimney is very superstitious. Eddie is always the first to dismiss that sort of thing. He's also distrustful of technology, so that's a specific thing about him, I guess. You could say he's a grounded guy. Eddie is played by Ryan Guzman, whom you might recognize from the Step Up series.
It's called the ocean motion. Here's the ocean. Here comes the motion.
Or J-Lo's hit thriller, The Boy Next Door.
I will never, ever gonna let you go.
Or this iconic moment of Pretty Little Liars product placement.
Insidious too. Have you seen the first one?
Yeah, I can't lie, it doesn't help that Guzman is not the strongest actor on the show, in my opinion. I really don't want to be mean, and to be fair, I'm sure the subpar writing also affects the performance. If you don't give an actor much to work with, they can only make so much out of it. And also, for all I know, maybe he could be good under better direction, the right circumstances, who knows?
Because I knew you were too stubborn to get past it. I live in a freaking little storage closet.
But as we see him on 911, it's just not giving the way the other characters give.
They're all dead.
He can deliver lines convincingly enough, and I think he does better at comedy. He's good at mugging to the camera in sillier scenes. But when it comes to the more serious, dramatic stuff, or emotional intensity in general, I have yet to be very impressed. One of my favorite games to play with this show is in any scene where Eddie is in the background, just zooming in on his face and seeing what he's doing. 9 times out of 10, he looks completely dead inside. Not a thought behind those eyes. This is his face during the birth of his child. And when he does try to inject a little more emotion into one of his lines, it can lead to some pretty wacky delivery.
Come on, guys, stop agreeing with each other like you're fighting.
Like that was the best take you got? However, like Scott on Teen Wolf, this has honestly grown on me. It's part of the camp of the show to me now. And if this description is making you mad, I can't stress to you enough, I love this show so much that even the parts of it that I think are bad often grow on me. I do love Eddie, both in spite of his bad writing and weird performance, and because of it. As much as I complain about him, in terms of how much time I spend thinking about him and how much more I'd like to see of him on the show, how much potential I think he has, I think he's technically one of my favorite characters. Throw in Ryan Guzman's checkered filmography and I've become obsessed.
Lucky for you, I'm an excellent dancer.
One of my favorite Eddie acting moments is this scene in season 7 when he overhears Christopher saying he barely remembers his mom, and he's supposed to look pained, and this is what he does. He wants to look upset, but it's like he's too concerned with looking hot to try and look authentically emotional. He has pretty boy disease, and I'm afraid it's terminal. So let's move on to some of the supporting characters. First, I'll go through some of the other firefighters on the 118. The first supporting firefighter we meet is Ravi Punikar, who's introduced in season 4. Ravi is basically the 118 newbie. He's still a probationary firefighter.
Hey, bro!
He mostly shows up to be the clueless new guy the main characters pick on and make do all the grunt work.
Guess someone's going into the sewer. I'm going into the sewer, aren't I?
His first episode is one I really like, this episode Jinx, in which we learn about the supposed firehouse curse, where saying the word quiet inevitably means that you're going to have an extremely busy day.
No, pretty quiet.
Whoa! Did he just say?
No! Sorry, I just said it was...
Don't say it again!
I just like episodes that feature a lot of zany 911 calls, which this one does. And it has some good jokes.
It's already running. You're gonna have to wash that by hand.
Really? It's so quiet.
I like Ravi. I think he's funny and the actor is really charming. We don't see much of Ravi's inner world until this episode in season 6, where we see Ravi has returned to the academy because of a traumatic call that gave him doubts about doing the job.
Do you ever stop and think that some people's lives just aren't worth saving?
If you're thinking that, then you don't belong on the rig.
The only detail I don't like about Ravi is this strange moment in season 6 where they reveal that he's a landlord.
My third apartment building. What? That's how you build generational wealth.
Why would they do that? That's character assassination, not my Ravi.
I do have a 2-bedroom that's about to be on the market, so...
But I look forward to hopefully learning more about him in the show's future. In season 5, when both Chimney and Eddie have left the 118 temporarily, we meet 2 new firefighters, Lucy Donato and Jonah Greenway. Lucy is basically Eddie's replacement, and they sort of set her up like a female Buck. She's very confident and reckless and flirty. I wanted to like Lucy, but her introduction is kind of weird. After she meets the 118, they all go out for drinks together, and Lucy kisses Buck, who is in a committed relationship and yet doesn't object to this.
Yeah, I may have kissed her back.
It's just weird. They don't even set up Buck's relationship as being on the rocks. If anything, he and his girlfriend had just reaffirmed their commitment and grown closer, so it feels kind of out of character for him to cheat. I guess it's like the hen cheating thing. I just don't like seeing characters I like cheat on their partners. I know they need to have conflict, but I'd rather it be anything but that. As far as Lucy herself, though, we just never really get below the surface with her, so it's hard to get to like her. At the beginning of season 6, they have a little video call with her where she's like, "Sorry guys, I broke my ankle, so I won't be on the show much this season."
So we probably won't see you for a few weeks then.
Doctor says between 4 and 6 weeks.
So clearly the actress had a conflict or something. For some reason she couldn't return. I would guess that they intended to have her on the show for longer, and in time we would have learned more about her. But given that that didn't happen, watching her episodes in retrospect, it all just feels kind of pointless. Also, like I said, they were clearly trying to make her this echo of Buck, but as we've established, what makes Buck such a compelling character is that while he is confident and reckless and flirty, he's also so vulnerable and naive and stupid. Lucy doesn't have any of that. She's just cool and confident all the time, seemingly without any of the conflict or flaws underneath. So I think that's why she doesn't come off as particularly interesting. Jonah Greenway is a paramedic who acts as Chimney's replacement while he's on the road looking for Maddie. For most of the season, Jonah seems nice and normal, but Hen dislikes him immediately because she resents his replacing her bestie Chimney. But late in the season, things start to seem off with Jonah. On 2 separate occasions, a patient he was caring for that seemed fine suddenly goes into cardiac arrest. In the first incident, Jonah's able to get the person back, but in the second, the person dies, and the way he reacts to this makes Hen suspicious.
Should have been able to save her.
I usually save them.
So of course she starts looking into his past. At this point, Chimney is back in town, and the 2 of them do some sleuthing. They realize that Jonah has been hopping from city to city in different fire departments, leaving each with a string of mysterious deaths.
So maybe he's a bad paramedic.
Or maybe he's a serial killer.
That's right, Jonah has a hero complex and became a firefighter so that he could intentionally push people to the brink of death and then bring them back. I honestly love this storyline. I love how pulpy and sensational it is. This is the kind of drama I get down with on a show like this. 911 will occasionally do episodes and storylines that are darker, more drawn-out procedural whodunits, kind of like Criminal Minds or SVU or something, as opposed to the more vignette-ish 911 call episodes. And I don't always like these storylines as much, but sometimes they hit, and this one hits. We eventually see this flashback sequence where as a child, Jonah saved his school bus driver who had had a heart attack while driving, and he was lauded as a local hero, and this was what gave him his savior complex in the first place.
So what's it like being a hero?
freaking awesome.
And I can't even explain it, but I was like giggling, kicking my feet while watching this. I just loved the drama. I loved how much they cranked up the intensity of this storyline. And this is what leads to Jonah kidnapping Hen and Chimney and stopping and restarting Chimney's heart. It's such an insane scene. He's got Chimney strapped to his table like a mad scientist slab. It's so great. Of course, Jonah gets caught and all is well by the end of the season. Jonah's not my favorite character or anything. He's intentionally a pretty blank slate, but I love this twist. I love this flashback sequence. I love this storyline. Going back in time a little bit, Season 3 introduced a firefighter named Lena Bosco. The gang meets Lena during a tsunami that hits Los Angeles at the beginning of Season 3. She's specifically paired up with Eddie, not necessarily romantically. It seems like that might have been their original intention, but they ultimately just become friends, and Lena doesn't stick around long enough to become a true love interest for Eddie, if that's what the plan was. This might be another controversial one, but on my rewatch, I actually was into the character of Lena. Unlike someone like Lucy, although they introduce her as a cool, competent lady firefighter, it doesn't feel like she's just this one-dimensional, badass woman firefighter. She has some emotional depth right off the bat, where she spends the whole episode really worried about her house's captain, who's still missing in the tsunami, and she eventually briefly joins the 118 while Buck is out of commission with his blood clot lawsuit. Lena is played by wrestler and MMA fighter Ronda Rousey, and I remember seeing some fans saying they didn't like Lena because they didn't like Rousey's acting. But honestly, I think she does just fine in 911. Maybe it's partly because she's usually acting opposite Eddie, of all people.
That hit to the nose, was that a lucky shot? Or had he dropped his hands?
Tap out or knockout. Those are the rules.
I liked Lena. I hardly ever see people talking about her, so maybe she's not that popular, but I kind of wish she'd stuck around in some capacity. Okay, side note, after writing this part of the video, I found out completely independently of this that Ronda Rousey once expressed support for Sandy Hook conspiracy theories, so that doesn't change my opinion on the character she played in 911, but I did just want to issue a correction on this part of the script regarding Ronda Rousey. You do not, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to her. But wait, double side note, like 2 days after I wrote that correction, Ronda Rousey actually issued an apology for sharing Sandy Hook conspiracy theory tweets in 2013. And not that it fully excuses doing that or any other weird politics she might have, I don't know much about her, but it's actually a pretty good apology and relevant for these times where a lot of people seem to be falling down reactionary rabbit holes. So to sum up, Ronda Rousey has my tentative respect. And more importantly, I liked the character she played on 911. Now on to our non-118 supporting characters. There are a few recurring cast members at the 911 call center. Josh Russo is one of the dispatchers introduced in Season 2. He eventually becomes a close friend to Maddie at the call center. Josh is fine. He's a nice guy. There's nothing wrong with Josh, except for the fact that he is played by possibly the hammiest actor ever to exist. He's very breathy.
With the bomb in the truck, that was pretty wild situation.
And he's very emotive.
Everybody's always in their car or looking at their phones. They're in their car looking at their phones.
I had an epiphany about this guy while rewatching the episode where the call center is taken hostage. Josh has some dramatic moments in this episode because the guy that brutally gay-bashed him several episodes prior turns out to be the leader of this call center attack. By the way, yes, I do think it's unfortunate that one of the only in-depth storylines given to one of our only canonically gay male characters is him being brutally gay-bashed. Anyway, in the hostage episode, when Josh sees this man and realizes who it is, his reaction is just Oscar-worthy.
He's going to be shadowing you to see how we work.
Hi, handsome. See any good movies lately?
It was this moment that made me realize this guy is like a silent movie actor. He's always doing the most with his face, to the extent that if you took away the audio, you'd still be able to tell exactly what's going on with him. Truly born in the wrong generation. To be clear, I love this guy. The hamminess used to bother me, but like I said earlier, because I love this show, even the weird or unintentionally funny stuff grows on me and becomes an essential part of my viewing experience. No! Keep doing you, Josh. Best Actor. Then there's the supervisor of the call center, Sue Blevins. She's a nice, no-nonsense boss. She sometimes plays into the plot by using her skills or her kind of omniscient knowledge of the call center and the dispatch system to help solve various mysteries. Her most dramatic storyline comes in season 5 when she's intentionally struck by a car after trying to intervene in a kidnapping. This episode is kind of a special message episode about how 911 dispatchers should also be considered first responders, and I agree with that, I guess.
And did you know dispatchers aren't even classified as first responders in most parts of the country, which is crazy.
I like Sue. I like how much she looks out for her employees. She's always telling people to go to therapy.
Schedule a session with our counselor. That's not a suggestion.
Good supporting character. No complaints here. Season 3 introduces Chimney's surprise brother, Albert Hahn. Albert is Chimney's half-brother on his father's side, and since Chimney's dad was absent for most of Chim's life, Chimney and Albert had never met before season 3. In season 3, Albert has fled Korea because he's sick of living under his dad's strict rules, so he comes to Chimney hoping he'll find this nice older brother figure, but instead, Chimney is pretty hostile to Albert when they first meet.
You are not my brother.
He resents that Albert got to have a relationship with their father and that he doesn't even seem to appreciate it. He also resents that all of his friends quickly take a liking to Albert. It makes Chimney feel like old news. This is like a Degrassi Junior High plot, but Chimney and Albert eventually do make up and develop a brotherly relationship. Albert even becomes a firefighter at one point, but gradually realizes he's not cut out for it and was only really pursuing it to please Chimney. There's this wild episode where at the same moment that Maddie and Chimney are having their baby, Albert gets into a horrible car accident and almost dies, but it's okay, he makes it.
Fully healed. Thanks to all of you.
I don't have much to say about Albert, but I like him fine. It's just like a lot of these supporting characters, we only know so much about him. We only see so much of his actual POV, but it is nice to see Chimney kind of regain a brother figure after the death of his friend Kevin back in the day. Moving on to significant others, one of the first main ones we meet in season 1 is Athena's soon-to-be ex-husband, Michael Grant. Like I said, Michael has recently come out as gay at the beginning of the series, which is a big shock to his wife and kids, and his storylines for the next couple seasons are largely about his split from his family, how he and Athena manage taking care of the kids, and how he deals with the addition of Bobby to the family. As I mentioned earlier, I don't love Michael. On paper, there's not a lot wrong with him, but there are a few things that make it hard for me to appreciate him as much as some of the other supporting characters. For one, this might sound petty, but he has this one line early on in one of his arguments with Athena. He basically says that she was desperate to marry him because her biological clock was ticking.
You know, denial worked just fine when you were a 37-year-old single woman whose biological clock was running out.
And to be honest, I think I've never quite been able to get over that one line. It's so nasty and pointed. I know we all say things we don't mean in the heat of the moment, but it's so specific and cruel that it makes you wonder how long he'd been harboring that. I just think that's not the kind of thing you say to a woman, let alone your wife, the mother of your children. So he made a bad impression on me early on. But in a larger story sense, I also think Michael as a character was kind of set up for failure just by not being involved in any of the first responder drama like the other characters. In general, it seems like the love interests on this show who are not fellow firefighters or dispatchers or cops or reporters tend to make less of an impression because it's harder to write them into the plot of the show, which can make it feel like they don't have a lot of agency. I can't bring myself to care that much about Michael because his drama feels pretty disconnected from most of the main characters' drama on the show. He's an architect, and they occasionally reach to try and bring him into the plot through that, but it never feels very convincing.
What do you know about bank vaults?
Well, I put in a few.
Ever take one down?
And then eventually he gets a love interest of his own who's a doctor, and that brings him into things a little more at times, but by that point I'm already not very invested in Michael. I like the love interest more than I like Michael, but as you can imagine, if Michael already isn't getting a lot of screen time, David here sure isn't going to have much to do. There's one pretty good Michael-centric episode. It's this takeoff on Rear Window in season 4, and that one's okay because it actually involves Michael and David in an active way, but again, by this point, it's kind of too little too late. They try to do this brain tumor storyline with Michael in season 3, and this just misses the mark entirely for me. Like I said, it feels so disconnected from everything else that it's hard to feel invested in. And Michael finally leaves the show in season 5 to accompany his now fiancé David to go do relief work in Haiti. Which brings me to the metatextual drama with Michael. In real life, this actor, Rockman Dunbar, actually left the show because he refused to comply with the network's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. You see, Dunbar belongs to the Church of Universal Wisdom, a religious order that believes that introducing any foreign substances to the body is sacrilege, meaning no vaccines. In 2021, Fox implemented a vaccine mandate. Dunbar allegedly refused and was dismissed from the show. Dunbar actually sued Disney and 20th Television after this, claiming racial discrimination. He had sought a vaccine exemption on both religious and medical grounds. Both of these requests were dismissed. Dunbar accused the network of accepting exemptions from non-Black cast and crew members, but from what I can tell, he has not publicly specified who he was talking about. I would love to know more details about that accusation. I certainly hope Fox was not granting frivolous vaccine exemptions to any cast and crew members, but we don't have any public evidence for that. Honestly, when I first heard about this, I thought Dunbar was pretty squarely in the wrong, but having now read more about it, I'm not 100% sure anymore. On kind of a fundamental moral level, I personally don't agree with any belief that rejects vaccination. I really believe in the social responsibility of getting vaccinated, that it's not just a personal choice since it affects others. However, to be fair, supposedly the network did say that employees were allowed to request religious exemptions, and it does sound like Dunbar probably had a valid religious exemption. So in context, divorced from my personal idea of right and wrong, I don't quite see what grounds they had to dismiss his request, other than just thinking his religion sounded silly. I don't know. It sounds like it was a very messy situation overall. After he was dismissed, Dunbar was allegedly told by Fox's lawyers that his request for a religious exemption was denied because his beliefs are insincere based on the fact that he had previously received tattoos and ear piercings, and because an unnamed representative linked to Dunbar told Fox that his wife threatened to divorce him if he got the vaccine. Anyway, it's funny. In the seasons following Michael's departure, you can see the writers twisting themselves in knots to occasionally clarify that Michael does still exist and they haven't forgotten about him, but he's conveniently never available to appear on screen.
No, Michael, I'm telling you, do not come. No, keep Harry there with you and David. He does not need to be here for this.
Should we call Michael? No, better not to worry him.
I mean, he really loves being with Michael and David.
Harry loves being with Michael and David, so don't worry about it if you never see them on screen again. One of the other most prominent significant other characters is Hen's wife, Karen Wilson. I know I just said that thing about external love interests who aren't involved with any of the first responder jobs having a harder time fitting into the narrative, but I would say Karen is probably the one big exception to that. Maybe it's just that she fits better into the dynamics of the show since she's not an ex, but it also probably has something to do with how much I love the actress, Tracy Thoms. I've loved Tracy Thoms ever since I was a 12-year-old rent head. She's great. She's so likable and talented. Karen works at NASA. When she and Hen met, she was this incredibly driven, ambitious, serious person, and it seems like Hen kind of helped her loosen up.
You sound like you're about to snap somebody in half with that tongue of yours.
I do honestly feel like there are moments where Hen could stand to treat Karen a little better, but generally I like their relationship. Like I said with Hen, Karen's drama often revolves around her desire to have more kids, taking in foster children, etc. I love Karen. I think she deserves the world. Women in STEM, you love to see it. Finally, we have all the Buck and Eddie love interests. Buck and Eddie each cycle through several relationships because they're the only main characters who were not set up with endgame love interests early on, which could mean nothing. I'll start with Eddie. Like I said before, Eddie's first love interest is his estranged wife, Shannon Diaz. From what the show has told us, Eddie and Shannon met in middle school, but reconnected and started dating in senior year.
You guys in the 12th grade when you met? 8th, then we lost touch and reconnected in 12th.
They got pregnant with Christopher pretty much right out of high school, and Eddie joined the army after finding out.
That's the reason I enlisted in the first place.
Again, without telling me. I got pregnant and you signed up. Surprise!
Oh, Shannon. It's hard for me to explain because she's a pretty minor, underdeveloped character, but ever since my latest rewatch, the idea of Shannon Diaz fills me with a profound sadness. This woman, this girl, who got pregnant as a teen by this bland, emotionally stunted boy, married him because what else are these two Catholic kids going to do in this situation?
That was a lot of the reason why we got married. The church.
This woman who I would imagine gave up her hopes and dreams to settle down in her hometown and have this guy's kid, while he immediately ran away from his problems to join the army, leaving her to do all of the childcare. This woman whose in-laws hate her, seemingly for no reason, and won't even shut up about how much they hate her after she's dead.
Even in death, that woman is making his life chaos.
Not even on the day of her funeral.
His mom was pretty brave too.
How? By running out on him?
Ramon.
Her body is not even cold in the ground yet, Ramon. This woman who only wanted to be with her sick mother and had no choice but to leave her husband and child because said idiot husband refused to relocate with her.
Have you given any more thought to California? Come on, you're finally home.
You immediately want me to get into a car, drive 800 miles with a 6-year-old.
Your son.
Can I maybe just get a little damn time?
This woman who, after reconnecting with her husband, basically has her child held hostage from her, while Eddie contemplates whether she deserves to see her son again.
Are you ever gonna let me see Christopher?
Of course. Eventually.
Who realizes that her idiot husband will never see her as anything more complex than the mother of his child.
A nice day on the beach with my son and his mother.
Okay, so is that what I am to you?
And when she finally decides to leave, to put herself first, she immediately dies in a horrific car accident, literally the day after asking Eddie for a divorce. She spends her last breaths apologizing to him.
I'm so sorry.
Only to be buried in some California cemetery hundreds of miles away from home. Like, honestly, when I lay it all out like that, it makes me want to cry. What a brutal, thankless life. And the worst part is, I don't think the writers of the show realize that that's what they've created with Shannon. I don't think they even see how tragic it is, how badly Eddie treated her. Eddie's backstory episode, Eddie Begins, is one of my least favorite episodes of the show, not only because it's a meaningless story that doesn't require Eddie to change or grow in any way, but also because the only new insight it gives us about Eddie is that he was a terrible husband, and the show doesn't even seem aware that that's the effect of the episode. In fact, whenever Eddie reminisces about Shannon, it's like he's put on the rose-colored glasses and decided that actually their marriage was great and he loved being married to her.
Even when things got really bad, there was always a part of me that loved being married to her. Can I maybe just get a little damn time?
Eddie, you spent most of your marriage trying to get literally as far away from her as possible, and the minute she came back into your life, she asked you for a divorce. But apparently she was the love of his life.
I guess she was the love of your life.
I think she was.
Since when? When was that ever supported by the text? In season 7, when he has his insane Shannon doppelganger storyline, it turns out he has all this buried resentment for her, and it's like, Eddie, I swear to God.
All I got was a note saying you had gone I know I wasn't a perfect husband. I did my fair share of running too, but I came back.
He should be being eaten alive by guilt. This should be like a My Tears Ricochet situation. I also like Shannon's actress, Devin Kelly. I feel like she gives it a lot of depth, even though the character isn't necessarily written with much. Apparently, Devin Kelly is also from St. Paul. I knew she felt like a kindred spirit. Basically, Shannon deserved so much better. It kills me that she was tethered to this block of cheese of a man for so much of her short life. No one understands Shannon like I do. I would have treated her right. Moving on, the first woman Eddie dates after Shannon is Christopher's teacher at school, Ana Flores. Ana is very sweet and nice and seems like the perfect woman for Eddie, but he eventually realizes he's only staying in a relationship with her for Christopher's sake, not because he's really in love with her.
But just be sure that you're following your heart, not Christopher's, okay?
It's kind of wild. The minute things start to get serious with Ana, he suddenly has a terrible panic attack. They frame this as Eddie not being ready for a relationship this soon after Shannon, but I don't know. I think there might be more to examine there. He eventually breaks up with Ana, mercifully. Get out of there, girl, you can do better. And the next big Eddie love interest is Marisol. Marisol is a woman Eddie and the 118 actually met on a call in season 6. It's a pretty funny call where Marisol's brother tries to DIY insulate her attic, but passes out and gets encased in foam insulation. This is one of the funnier bad CGI moments on the show. And then Eddie, after deciding he's finally ready for another relationship throughout the season, happens to run into her again at the hardware store. I have a little season 6 conspiracy theory about this. I am almost certain that the writers actually intended to set Eddie up with a different woman he met on a call in season 6. There's this episode called Cursed, where a washed-up actress, Felisa, has this string of terrible luck, resulting in all these emergencies the 118 responds to. And the episode specifically draws a connection between her and Eddie. They bond a little throughout the episode, and at the end she even meets him on a beach, the same place he once spent time with Shannon. And they have a little emotional talk.
You know, sometimes it's easier to believe that you're cursed than believe you're wrong.
I feel like they were clearly setting up these two meeting again at some point so that Felisa could become Eddie's new love interest. But I would guess that something happened, maybe the actress became unavailable, and the plan fell through. So instead, they thought back to this other woman Eddie had met through a call and decided to bring her back instead. That's my theory. And I would definitely have preferred Felisa because she was more developed, she was established as her own person, she had been set up more naturally as a love interest for Eddie, but clearly it didn't work out, and instead we got Marisol. I don't have anything against Marisol, we just learn very little about her in her time on the show, and by the time Eddie starts eyeing up this doppelganger of his dead wife, you're like, well, I guess that's the end of Marisol. There's this bizarre B-plot in one episode of season 7 where Eddie learns that Marisol was once in training to be a nun, and that freaks him out because it makes him realize he has a previously undiscovered reservoir of Catholic guilt.
She's got a reservoir of Catholic guilt just lying dormant, waiting to be activated.
It's so weird, and it doesn't lead to anything consequential. They end the episode by deciding to take things slower in their relationship, but that doesn't matter one goddamn bit, seeing as 2 episodes later, Eddie will start emotionally cheating on Marisol with the doppelganger of his dead wife. Anyway, that's all of Eddie's love interests, unless you count said doppelganger of Eddie's dead wife. Her name is Kim, she's a former actress, she's cool. Kind of crazy. I don't know if I would have the guts to show up at the doorstep of the guy I just found out only liked me because I resemble his dead wife, dressed as the dead wife, and tell him to just pretend I'm his dead wife and work through all his trauma by expressing all the things he never got to say to her, but I can respect the audacity of that decision.
And maybe there are things you need to say. Things that you never got the chance to say, let me hear them.
So moving on to Buck's love interests, the first person he connects with after Abby is a plucky TV reporter named Taylor Kelly. Buck meets Taylor on a call, and she's originally introduced as a very cutthroat, ambitious journalist who will do anything for a story, sometimes disregarding things like ethics. In her first episode, she comes to the firehouse with her crew to do a feature on the 118, and she reveals this sort of amoral nature by the end of the story.
Look, your job is saving lives. Mine is telling their stories, even the ones they might not want me to.
Taylor comes back eventually, and she and Buck start seeing each other casually, but in season 4 they reconnect and start a more serious, committed relationship. I've seen a lot of fans hate on Taylor. The unfortunate pattern here is that fandoms tend to come down hard on female characters, particularly those who date their favorite boys or, God forbid, interfere with their favorite ships. So from what I can tell, that's a big part of why some fans dislike characters like Taylor and Abby. But honestly, I like Taylor a lot. She's probably my favorite Buck love interest of the show so far. She's much more developed than most of the women who Buck or Eddie date, other than Abby, obviously, and I really liked how driven she is, that she's not just generically nice or sweet. Buck and Taylor's relationship is progressing pretty well throughout seasons 4 and 5 until Buck kisses Lucy for no reason, but the thing that ultimately breaks them up is Taylor leaking information about Jonah's crimes before the 118 wanted her to.
They have his name and personnel photo already? How did she get it so fast?
Even several deaths.
Good question.
As we know, Buck is very principled and innocent, and he can't forgive this, which is fine. But even this is kind of refreshing to me. I like that Taylor doesn't compromise her ambitions or sense of self for this relationship.
You knew who I was when we started dating.
I guess I thought I could learn to live with it.
I don't want to be something you have to learn to live with.
And also, on this show, which is so frequently wholesome and sentimental with its characters, I like this as a reminder that not everyone in this world is operating on the same saccharine level as our main characters. Taylor's just doing her job.
This stupid job isn't stupid to me. You don't have to like it, but you don't get to make me feel bad about it.
Honestly, I would love to see Taylor come back, not as a love interest for Buck, but just a recurring character who's around from time to time. I think having a reporter in the story can add an interesting element at times. In season 6, Buck meets this woman Natalia on a call at a funeral. Natalia is a death doula, and she and Buck hit it off right away, partly because Natalia is intrigued by his recent brush with death.
I died. Just for a few minutes. Struck by lightning.
Now I just fall down.
Now, I think this actress is lovely, and I think the idea of a death doula is interesting, but there are a few problems with Natalia. For one, I don't know this for a fact, but my impression of season 6 of 911 is that at this point, they knew they were being canceled by Fox, but didn't yet know for sure that the show would be picked up by another network. So the second half of the season especially feels like it's rushing to tie up all the loose ends, just in case this ends up being the final season of the show. So you have Eddie hastily getting over his hang-ups with dating, you have Maddie and Chimney wrapping up all their conflicts and getting engaged, and you have Buck suddenly meeting and immediately becoming very infatuated with a woman who only has 4 episodes to establish herself. As a result, Natalia and Buck's relationship feels really underdeveloped, but characters keep telling us how great it is. Their first date is palpably awkward. But then Buck's having a heart-to-heart with Eddie, like, yeah, man, no woman's ever gotten me like Natalia gets me. And it's like, what are you even talking about?
There's something different about her. I feel like she sees me. You know, like she really sees me for who I am and what I've been through.
And poor Natalia gets absolutely zero development of her own. Instead, she spends all her time just telling Buck how cool and epic he is.
Firefighter and philosopher. Noted.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met anybody quite like you. You're all in about everything, and I still don't understand why you did that for them.
It's surreal. Natalia realizes how many partners Buck's had and kind of immediately gets the ick, which I admittedly thought was pretty funny, but she happens to witness Buck deliver the baby of the woman he was a sperm donor for, and then she's right back to telling Buck how awesome he is.
I saw the way you looked at that baby, and then watched you give him away.
Hilariously, once the show was saved from cancellation, in the season 7 premiere, Buck informs Eddie that he and Natalia just quietly broke up off screen.
We broke up. Don't know why I thought it was such a great idea dating a death doula.
So much for this.
I feel like she sees me. You know, like she really sees me for who I am and what I've been through.
And finally, Buck's most recent love interest is a man. Very exciting. In season 7, the 118 ends up teaming up with Tommy Kennard, a former member of the 118 who we had previously met in Hen and Chimney's flashback episodes, who has since transferred to air support. He's a helicopter pilot now. Tommy decides to help out Hen when she disobeys orders to go search for Bobby and Athena's cruise ship. And in the following episode, Buck tries to get to know Tommy better, only to find out that Tommy is spending a lot of time with Buck's best friend, Eddie.
So there's a fight.
Yeah, big unification bout.
Yeah.
It's been sold out for weeks.
Oh, wow. I was unaware.
Buck gets really jealous, and I'm not gonna lie, most of the episode makes it seem like he's jealous of Tommy for stealing Eddie from him, not jealous of Eddie for stealing Tommy, but whatever. After some convoluted drama, Tommy comes over to apologize, and Buck tells him that he's basically just been trying to get his attention.
Trying to get your attention has been kind of exhausting.
My attention?
Tommy makes a move on Buck, and Buck realizes he's cool with that, so they decide to go on a date. This leads to a very embarrassing moment where Eddie and Marisol happen to show up at the same restaurant where Buck and Tommy are on their date, and Buck, compulsively makes the biggest fool of himself.
And then we're gonna go find some hot chicks, because, hot chicks love firefighters.
Honestly, this is so real. I can relate to this. Have you ever been in a situation where you're feeling insecure, so you just start saying some stupid shit out of anxiety, and you can feel as you're saying it that you're embarrassing yourself, but you just can't stop the words from falling out?
A lie just slid its way out of my mouth, and I couldn't stop it. It was humiliating.
Understandably, after this, Tommy tells Buck that he doesn't think Buck is ready to date a man, but Buck ends up winning him over, and they're still dating by the end of the season. I don't mind Tommy. I think he's fine. In fact, when I most recently watched his introductory episode in season 7, I thought it was really good. He comes off as very cool and suave and nice right off the bat.
Chief Simpson, trouble reading. Can't hear. Think he bought it? What's our motto? Who cares?
I know some people have really latched on to Tommy to ship with Buck, and I can't say I'm quite in that boat, so to speak. We just haven't seen much of Tommy yet, let alone of this relationship, so right now I feel about the same about Tommy as I would about any of Buck's love interests. I'm not more into their relationship just because Tommy is a man, you know? I like him better than Natalia because at least he doesn't just stand around like, wow, Buck, when you saved Bobby and Athena's cruise ship, that was so brave and daring of you. And don't worry, you don't have to ask me any questions about myself. But I also don't like him more than Taylor because he's not yet as fully formed as a character as she was. I'm curious to see where this goes in the next season. I do think Tommy sometimes comes off kind of cold and disinterested, but honestly, it's probably just the actor. He's kind of stone-faced. I do like Lou Ferrigno Jr., especially after his role on Teen Wolf. Any enemy of Jordan Parrish is a friend of mine, but sometimes on 911, his demeanor can make him seem like he doesn't even like Buck all that much.
I didn't know how you take it, so I just took a guess.
So not like that.
Damn. Also, if I were to be really nitpicky, one reason this pairing hasn't really connected with me is that in my opinion, Buck and Tommy look a little too similar. They don't look exactly the same, but I feel like they're a similar height and build, they have similar face shapes, similar hair, they both have cleft chins. I was gaslighting myself into thinking that it was just me, but then I recently watched a couple episodes of season 7 with my friend who hasn't seen the entire show, and she also was like, why do they look identical? It's totally petty of me. I'm not saying it's a huge problem, but that might be part of why the physical chemistry isn't really reading to me. The very last category of characters I want to mention are the kids of our main characters. I don't want to go into this in great detail, partly because most of these kids are pretty minor characters, and also because I don't have a lot of super opinionated thoughts on these child characters, and I feel like it would be kind of weird if I did, honestly, so I'll try to keep it brief. First off, as I mentioned earlier, Athena and Michael have 2 kids, May and Harry Grant. May is interesting because she actually comes of age on the show and becomes a more involved character in the later seasons in her adulthood. She was originally planning to go to college at USC, but after helping her mom rescue people during the tsunami in season 3, she decides to defer enrollment and instead take a job at the 911 call center.
Well, it's more about what she's doing to fill that gap.
911, what's your emergency?
I thought this was good. It's interesting to see this very young character take this intense grown-up job, and how she interacts with the job and her coworkers is unique in that way. She has this entertaining conflict with an older, renowned dispatcher who rejoins the call center in season 5 and has it out for May for some reason.
So we're hiring fetuses now?
This reaches a very dramatic conclusion towards the end of the season when the 2 of them are trapped in a fire at the call center, and May has to help the dispatcher overcome her fire-related trauma. May ultimately leaves the dispatch center in season 6 to finally enroll in college, and I think this was related to the actress wanting to attend college in real life, but I really liked her presence on the show when she became a main character. So I'd be happy to see her if she ever did want to come back on the show in a more regular capacity. Harry Grant is the younger child. He's a little more impish and less responsible than May. One of his biggest storylines is being kidnapped in season 4. Like I said earlier, this puts a big strain on him and his parents, and Harry ends up leaving the show for a little while in season 6, which is explained in canon by him going to stay with Michael and David, and when he returns in season 7, he has been recast.
Let me look at you.
You might need to get on a step stool to do that. Welcome home, Harry.
Hey, Bobby.
This feels a little weird since the actor they recast him with doesn't really look much like the old actor and conspicuously looks much older than the original actor, but I don't blame them for recasting the role. Being a child actor is hard, and it's very normal and healthy for a child to want to step away from being on a big TV show. Recasting kids is actually a very common practice on soap operas, from what I understand. I know on EastEnders they recast all those kids like 10 times each. I feel like there's not that much to say about Harry. Storylines concerning Athena's kids tend to focus more on May, if anything, but I like Harry and May's relationship. You see them get closer as the show goes on. Hen and Karen also have a son, Denny. Like I mentioned, he's Hen's ex Eva's biological son, but Hen and Karen agreed to take him in. I think Eva might have had him when she was in prison, so she wouldn't have been able to take care of him. Denny's nice. He's cool, normal kid. We don't see a lot of Denny's perspective until season 6, when he secretly starts communicating with his biological father. This ends up causing quite a bit of drama with Denny's parents, but they ultimately decide they should let him start making some of his own decisions about this stuff, so they resolve to let him and his biological dad have a relationship. And in season 7, when Hen and Karen take in Mara, a traumatized foster child, Denny really steps up as an older brother, and the 2 of them become very close. Like I said when talking about Hen, Mara ends up being taken from them by a corrupt city councilwoman, but at the very end of the season, Maddie and Chimney decide to foster Mara so that she can stay close to Hen and Karen and Denny, so their family unit is partially restored as of right now. As I mentioned before, Eddie also has a young son, Christopher, and Christopher is probably the most involved child character on the show. Other than May, he probably gets the most screen time of any of these characters. Christopher is 7 when the show starts. He's really close with his dad, he has cerebral palsy, and he is just the cutest child actor I've ever seen in my life.
We're taking a little break from the internet right now.
But how am I supposed to talk to my friends? Buck, you don't even have a couch.
And I actually think he does really well with the more dramatic material they give him, too. He's got a real gravitas when he needs it. One of the more dramatic Christopher episodes is the tsunami storyline in season 3. Buck is babysitting Chris when the tsunami hits, and they spend time together while Buck tries to get them to safety while also rescuing other survivors around them. They eventually get separated, which leads to Buck wandering around the city despondently looking for him. He finally gets to the hospital and has to confront Eddie about it, but luckily, who should show up at that very moment but Christopher? This is one of Oliver Stark's best episodes, just an insane performance. And that's a very relevant detail about Chris. When Eddie joins the 118, Buck is immediately taken with Christopher, does everything he can to help Eddie find childcare, and he and Eddie and Chris basically end up forming this family unit. Buck becomes very important to Christopher to the point that in season 5, Eddie officially makes Buck his son's godfather.
Christopher would be taken care of by you.
Which could mean nothing. But dramatically, after a very painful scene where Christopher and Marisol walk in on Eddie having his moment with fake Shannon, Chris, understandably very upset, calls his grandparents and asks them to take him to live in Texas for a while.
What are you doing here?
Christopher called us.
So we ended season 7 with Christopher leaving Eddie for an indefinite amount of time. Normally this would make me sad, but honestly deserved. Can you imagine a more traumatic scenario than this for a child who's lost a parent? From what I've heard, I think they may have done this because the actor playing Christopher was moving in real life, so I'll be interested to see if he's able to stay on the show in any capacity. I hope so, I think he's great, but just like with Harry's actor, totally understandable if starring on a TV show as a child is not sustainable. Of course, Maddie and Chimney also have their daughter, Ji-Yun, who I think is played by a set of twins. That's not uncommon for really young characters in movies and TV. But she's a toddler, obviously, so I don't know what there is to say about a character who's a baby. Can you imagine if I was just like, this baby actor sucks? Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Anyway, we did it. That's all the major characters on 911, and it only took me 30-some pages of script. So now that you hopefully have some idea of the characters and significant storylines, I'd like to get into my more opinionated, qualitative assessments of the show in general. Let's start with the positive. So overall, I really like 911, if you couldn't tell. When I recently made a bunch of videos on MTV's Teen Wolf, I honestly didn't get so fixated on that show because I truly loved it, but because I found it funny and I liked or was captivated by some of its elements. Conversely, I'm covering 911 because I'm actually a huge fan. I'm actually invested in the characters and am rooting for this show. Especially on my first watch through, I was continually impressed by the consistent character development, the genuinely good and thoughtful messaging, and the exciting tone and pace of the series. First, I'll single out tone. I mentioned this in my intro, that 911 has a breezier, campier vibe than a lot of comparable shows. It's often silly, often tongue-in-cheek, but not in a particularly satirical or mean-spirited way. It just embraces camp instead of shunning it or acting like it's above it. It knows what it is. It knows rescuing someone from a shark attack on the freeway is silly, but it's not like Marvel movie irony poisoned about it. It just does its best to deliver on the premise in every way. Speaking of the show's camp, I want to take a moment to point out some of my favorite silly uses of music on 911. The editors tend to use songs that are really literally relevant to whatever's happening on screen.
Fly me to
When shows do this unironically, I feel like it can come off as kind of precious and annoying, but it's clear that 911 has a sense of humor about it, and as such, I think it's a very funny element of the show. For example, Bad Moon Rising in an episode about all the crazy 911 calls brought on by the full moon. Karma Chameleon, when a character experiences instant karma.
Karma's a bitch.
Trapped by Bruce Springsteen in an episode called Trapped that's all about being trapped. Pressure by Billy Joel in an episode called Under Pressure that's all about pressure. You might think they'd use Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie, but you see, they can't do that because they already used that one in the pilot episode.
You're wrong, Bobby.
Ice Ice Baby when a guy is stuck in a walk-in freezer. Karma Police when a guy gets hit by a car because of karma, and Athena, a police officer, watches him almost die. See, that one's got layers. High Hopes when an airship crashes. Hold On by Wilson Phillips when people are participating in a hands on a hot body contest and need to hold on to a car.
You're still here.
Bicycle Race by Queen when Buck rides a bike. Must have taken them hours to come up with that one. Hands Clap when the 118 are going door to door searching for someone's severed hand. Island in the Sun when a family is on the beach in the sun. However, while I'm at it, I will say there's this 911 call in season 6 where a man has been crushed in a tunnel he had dug under his yard in order to carry on an affair with his neighbor, and for some reason, this sequence uses the song Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads. For the record, I think this was a major missed opportunity to use the song Tunnel of Love by Bruce Springsteen. Amateurs. Anyway, another thing I love about 911 is its earnestness. Even when the show is being tongue-in-cheek or snarky, the messaging and character drama are ultimately really sincere and wholesome. This does sometimes cross over into the sentimental, and I can see some people maybe being put off by how hokey it can get, but I like most of it. Again, it just feels like it's sincerely embracing its genre and characters. It can be nice to watch something that doesn't feel ashamed of its own form. On a related note, one of my favorite things about 911 is its clear affection for its characters. Not only do most of them have real, consistent growth and actively become better people throughout the show, except for Eddie, but it's clear that the writers are invested in their happiness, if that makes sense. These characters go to therapy, like all of them, all the time.
What's your secret?
Therapy.
Going into this show, I think I was traumatized by Grey's Anatomy, which is one of the only other big primetime shows that I've seen most of. Coming to 911 after having seen a lot of Grey's, I was so shocked to see a show like this whose characters didn't constantly fall victim to meaningless tragedy, whose relationships didn't inevitably end in heartbreak. I love Grey's Anatomy, but any Grey's fans out there will know, at a certain point you basically have to stop getting genuinely invested in the relationships or even the characters themselves on that show, because every relationship is doomed to end in either death or divorce, and the writers have no qualms about randomly killing off or otherwise writing out characters, regardless of whether they've run their course. But on 911, they clearly want their characters to live and find success and fulfillment. Don't get me wrong, I understand that conflict needs to happen in a TV show. In fact, I'm a big proponent of that. I sometimes see fandom types say things like, why can't the characters just hang out and crochet together and be happy and cozy all the time? And though I understand the sentiment, a show with that premise would probably be really boring. Bad things have to happen in most stories for them to be interesting and consequential. But that being said, I do think there are ways to keep a show interesting and tense and conflict-ridden without just cursing all the characters to be miserable forever. As I've described at length, 911 does often put its characters through intense mortal peril and misery, but it's usually just enough to yield decent drama, not enough to actually ruin the characters' lives or bring them to a place they can't come back from. Now, this can be a double-edged sword. Without straying too far from the good section of this video, I do think this commitment to keeping the characters safe and alive no matter what can start to feel a little miraculous or contrived if they go too far with the drama they put the characters through. I think seasons 6 and 7 have this problem in some places. And when showrunners get too attached to their characters to the point that they can do no wrong or never really be in true danger, that can be a problem. But in general, on a show like this, I appreciate that you always have this sense that the characters will probably all be okay in the end, no matter what. But even without all of that, the premise of the show is also so genius to me. 911 didn't come out of nowhere. There have been firefighter and EMT dramas on TV since at least the 70s, and even just within 911's generation, you have the Dick Wolf Universe firefighter show, Chicago Fire, ABC's firefighter-focused Grey's Anatomy spin-off, Station 19, or more recently, CBS's Fire Country. The UK had its own long-running firefighter show, London's Burning, which I assumed would be kind of dry and boring, but in the first episode it features a rescue of a naked guy whose feet have been cemented in a toilet, so I do have to hand it to those Brits. And it seems like most of these contemporary fire and rescue shows probably owe a lot to Rescue Me, as well as shows like ER and Law and Order, which kind of set the tone for the modern hospital drama and police procedural, respectively. But as I mentioned in the intro, what I think ultimately makes 911 unique is that it basically combines all the best elements of various procedural subgenres. It's got medical drama, it's got fire and rescue, it's got police drama, it's got 911 dispatcher drama, and when all of these worlds weave together like they do on the show, it makes for this really rich and engaging formula. In addition to that, the show incorporates disaster, which makes everything all the more pulpy and exciting. Lately, I've been getting into the 90s disaster movie trend. I've been watching Dante's Peak, Volcano. I've watched the original Twister 5 times in the last couple months because apparently I'm not able to like anything in a normal way.
You've never seen it miss this house and miss that house and come after you.
Christ, Joe, is that what you think it did?
I've always liked disaster movies. There's something more palpably thrilling to me about them than straight-up horror movies, maybe because they're a little more realistic, relatively. I do love horror, but in terms of actual fright, I usually find it scarier to think about things like natural disasters or plausible catastrophic events than like demons, I guess. And watching these movies has made me realize that maybe a big part of why I like 911 is that it's like a never-ending string of mini disaster movies, the disaster genre distilled into its most entertaining elements. What I love about Twister, the non-stop disaster action, the hokey 90s humor, the formulaic but effective sappy character drama, all of that is present on 911. I would love a Twister-inspired episode, and I would like to be the one to write it. Tim Minear, hit me up. Anyway, the form and spectacle of the disaster movie is a huge part of 911's MO. There's a plane crash episode, an earthquake episode, tsunami episodes, mudslide episodes, a freeway overpass collapse episode, the sinking cruise ship episodes. Most of the seasons have at least one big centerpiece disaster. It's just really fun and exciting to see large-scale disasters dramatized like this. It's something that works very well on me specifically, and it's fun to see them escalate further and further as the show goes on. At the time of writing this, the show recently released a teaser for the upcoming season appearing to involve a bee tornado? Some sort of tornado made out of bees?
Is that It's a bee-nado.
As someone who is both obsessed with the movie Twister and allergic to bees, this could be big for me.
The truck was hauling 22 million killer bees.
Enough bees to kill
44,000 people.
I've never been more seated. They know me so well. But there is one more secret ingredient to the show's premise, in my opinion, and I'm not sure what to call this except Final Destination core. Allow me to explain. There are a couple different ways we see 911 calls on this show. Sometimes we'll begin with the moment the person calls 911.
I'm at Metro Fitness on Hollywood. My boss is burning up. You mean he's feverish? No, that is not what I mean.
In a call like this, we get information little by little, presumably not unlike how a real 911 dispatcher would have to gradually get a sense of the big picture, and there will probably be some twists and turns as the story unfolds. But other times, we'll see the full dramatic sequence of what led to the 911 call, almost like its own little short film. And then, when the situation reaches its crisis, we'll cut to the call.
911, what's your emergency?
I'm not sure where to start.
And in this type of call, the scenario scenario is rarely straightforward. It's usually kind of convoluted with some red herrings thrown in. Sometimes it's almost like a chain reaction. An incredible one that comes to mind is this sequence in season 6 when a man parachutes off of a building to propose to his girlfriend. You assume that jumping off the building will result in the 911 situation, but no, he successfully lands and proposes only to have his parachute snagged by a car, which then starts dragging him along the road. So there you have it, right? Well, then, after the man's girlfriend calls 911, we learn from Maddie that the car dragging the guy along the road is in fact an active bank robber.
It's a pickup. There's a man in it. He's wearing black.
That's a bank robber.
So you see, it's not just one thing. There's a series of compounding mishaps. A lot of the calls on the show are like that. And this reminds me of the Final Destination series. In those movies, the karmic hand of death itself is the villain.
It's all part of death's sadistic design, leading to the grave.
And as a result, the death scenes are these elaborate Rube Goldberg sequences where a number of little dangerous things go wrong, and you think it's going to be one thing, but it's actually another. The Final Destination style 911 calls are some of my favorite sequences on the show. I'm going to dedicate a whole section to my favorite 911 calls, so I'll give some more examples later, but I think it's so funny to put something like this into a procedural. The show's concentration of the genre and its incorporation of elements from various film influences make for such an engaging experience overall. It's like they're taking the most fun parts of a bunch of different types of movies and shows and putting them all together in one place. Finally, the last thing I want to bring up is the general ethos of this show. I haven't talked much about this yet, but 911 is really explicitly focused on championing diversity and progressive ideals. I'd go so far as to say it's one of the show's central themes. The show has a pretty diverse cast, and one consistent thing that comes up a lot is the adversity faced by minorities in first responder professions.
Imagine how much harder it must have been for the people who came before us.
They were and we are the first responders of change, and change doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen.
In the backstory episodes of characters like Hen, Chimney, and Athena, you see them face a lot of hostility from the more traditional establishment types of the LAFD and LAPD. A lot of racism, misogyny, homophobia, people who are hostile to the idea of diversifying these institutions.
$82,000. That's how much money taxpayers flush down the toilet with every failed female recruit.
It also comes up sometimes in calls and other storylines. Maybe the 118 has to respond to a racist bigot, or Buck gets life-changing advice from an elderly gay couple, or Hen comes face-to-face with prejudice in medicine while attending medical school and trying to get proper care for her mother. Does it get a little heavy-handed at times? Yeah.
And yes, you're a minority too, but you're still a man. You benefit from a system that keeps women that look like me down.
But I think this might just be a network TV thing, honestly. I've noticed it a lot on Grey's Anatomy, too. Maybe they feel the need to be a little on the nose and didactic when they discuss social issues, since they know they're reaching a pretty general audience, one that skews a lot older than a lot of streaming TV. In the few episodes of 911 Lone Star I did watch, I remember this moment where they introduced a trans character, and they did it so clunkily. They basically turned to the camera and said, "This character is transgender."
You got a stack full of life-saving commendations, which tells me you have a gift for threat assessment. Would you say that has anything to do with you being trans?
Like, I'm glad they have a trans character. I do think that's great, but could they not have found any more natural way to exposit that detail? But I don't think the heavy-handedness negates the message. It can make it feel a little corny at times, but that's not a deal breaker for me, especially on this show. I don't watch 911 for its tasteful subtlety. I wanted to bring this up not because diversity or progressive values in themselves necessarily make a TV show better. Obviously, if said diversity or values were mishandled or shallow or performative or in service of a bad story, I wouldn't praise it. But I think this element is handled adequately on 911, and I do think there's some inherent value in that. I like that it's a diverse show. I like that it's interested in the realities of its world. I like that it takes a consistent stand against bigotry and social injustice. I guess part of why it sticks out to me is that it seems like there are some shows like this that do take a more conservative lean, and I like that 911 isn't that. All that being said, there are limits to 911's progressive ideals, and those limits mostly apply to its depiction of the police. So, on that note, let's move on to the things I don't love about this show. It's time for everyone's favorite topic, Copaganda. I'm going to talk a little bit about police brutality in this section, just so you know. From what I can tell, it's not super clear who first coined this term, but as you can probably imagine, Copaganda refers to propaganda meant to influence public perception of the police. You can see this in a lot of different types of media, whether it's news outlets using biased language when reporting on police brutality, or police departments jumping on social media trends to try to appear more sympathetic to young people. But often when people use this term, they're referring to the depictions of law enforcement in film and television, especially television procedurals like Law & Order, CSI, Criminal Minds, Blue Bloods, etc. Have you ever been watching an episode of SVU and Stabler is like punching a guy in the face while interrogating him, and the show doesn't question it at all? It's always depicted as totally justified. That's one example of what I would call Copaganda. The term Copaganda and this whole conversation definitely gained more traction in 2020 following the Minneapolis PD's murder of George Floyd, when the true tenor of police brutality in this country was becoming impossible to ignore. And this is a controversial topic. Obviously, any criticism of the police is still pretty controversial in mainstream discourse, but I think the Copaganda conversation is even more difficult for people because it brings up our personal responsibility a little more, right? It implicates us and the things we watch and enjoy. For the average progressive person, especially progressive white people who might not have as much personal experience with violent policing, it's easy enough to disavow the police. But how many of us are willing to disavow Brooklyn Nine-Nine or SVU? Hearing that your favorite show might be problematic in some way naturally makes a lot of people feel defensive. But if anyone's feeling that way, I personally don't think you have to stop watching a show just because it is Copaganda or has elements of Copaganda. Maybe that's selfish or unprincipled of me, but I guess I don't think whether or not you watch a certain TV show is going to be a particularly meaningful form of activism. Instead, I just think it's incredibly important to be able to identify Copaganda when you see it, so that you can watch these things with a critical eye and hopefully be less susceptible to that messaging. There's a great channel on here called Skip Intro that's made several videos summing up Copaganda in various popular shows if you're interested in hearing more, but I don't think he's done 911 yet, so that honor will have to fall to me. 911, despite all of its seemingly progressive aims, cannot escape the network TV Copaganda machine. It can't help but fall into the same old propagandist traps of TV cops, and it kinda sucks. I don't like it. To be clear, I do not expect a show on one of these big networks to be particularly anti-cop. That's still a pretty left-wing perspective, and naturally shows like this are probably not going to express such controversial views, but that doesn't mean I have to like it, you know? This is the bad section, after all. And also, part of my critique here is that I think the show could still do what it does, but without falling into these traps. I think it could still be pro-cop without being quite so frustrating and hypocritical about it. So with that, let's talk about Athena Grant. As we've established, Athena is our cop character and therefore our main entry point into the LAPD law enforcement side of the show. As I said, I love Athena. I love the strong performance from Angela Bassett. I love her no-nonsense personality. I love how real and human and fleshed out of a character she is. But what I don't love is that she's a cop. Predictably, the show depicts Athena as a good, effective, skilled police sergeant whose instincts are always correct and whose methods are always justified. And again, I don't expect a show like this to not do that, but already there are some places where Athena's actions on the job are obviously not okay. And like Stabler beating people up in the interrogation room, the show doesn't ever seem to question that to the degree it deserves. deserves. Examples of this on 911 would be in season 1 when Athena, seeking revenge on the teenage girls who bullied her daughter,
They done picked the wrong family.
The wrong family.
You picked the wrong Prince Charming.
tracks down said teenage girls to stalk, harass, and arrest them.
No, see, they called to say some skanky teenage hoe living up in here bringing a real stank to the neighborhood. Bringing down the property values and such. You're under arrest.
There's this crazy thing at the end of season 7 where after Athena and Bobby's house has been burned down, Athena goes full vigilante and nearly kills Amir, a victim of Bobby's apartment fire in Minnesota who recently became acquainted with him and Athena. Athena assumed Amir was the one who burned their house down, but he wasn't. He was completely innocent, so Athena just stalked, harassed, and terrorized this poor man for no reason.
You're the one who was the murderers.
You sure about that?
She threatened him, held him at gunpoint, taunted him about his dead wife, all while off duty, and she doesn't face any consequences for this. Amir himself doesn't even seem mad at her for it.
Sorry I had you wrong.
Yeah, well, you weren't wrong about everything.
If I'm Amir, I'm about to file the biggest lawsuit the city of Los Angeles has ever seen. It'll be worse than whenever they drop a piano on Buck's head.
Pretty sure we could drop a piano on Buck's head and he wouldn't be able to sue the city for it.
But even more than her occasional abuse of power, the other thing about Athena's role as a cop on the show that always comes off as embarrassingly Copagandist to me is her blind, impotent deference to the authority of the police. In season 2, there's this heist episode where a bank was robbed during a bizarre 911 call that the 118 responded to, and this turns the entire 118 into suspects. For much of the episode, these two detectives are interrogating every member of the team. And throughout the episode, these detectives are depicted as kind of stupid and bureaucratic and bad at their jobs. The 118 is exasperated at having to be interrogated and searched like this. But when Hen expresses this frustration and her fear that as a black woman she may be treated worse than her colleagues, Athena is like, they're just doing their jobs. We need to let the wheels of justice turn.
I mean, I know it ain't easy, but you got to let the wheels of justice do their thing.
She makes coffee for the cops who come over to search and ransack her house.
Fresh coffee's in the kitchen.
You were expecting us?
It's like they wrote this episode where these two cops are incompetent, but then remembered that one of their characters is a cop, and they don't have the spines to say anything truly bad about cops, so they made sure to have Athena remind us that this is all justified and good, actually.
His accomplice probably killed him and took the stones. So where are they, firefighter Wilson?
Seriously? You got to let the wheels of justice do their thing.
Then there's an episode in season 3, probably the most illustrative example of the show's problem with depicting cops, where Athena's ex-husband Michael and their kids are pulled over by the cops and have a disastrous traffic stop. The cops are racist and aggressive and jumpy, and one of them almost shoots Athena's son Harry, who is a child. This is obviously traumatic for all of them, and it prompts an intense conversation and disagreement in Athena's family over what happened and how it implicates the LAPD. Michael and the kids were completely disillusioned by this incident. They can't fathom how the cops could be a force for good after an experience like that. But Athena, in her Athena way, completely takes the cops' side.
But they didn't fire their weapons, thank God. All right? It was just a bad stop. They happen. Well, arguing with the police probably wasn't the best choice.
This is a crazy episode. Athena confronts her boss about the fact that one of the officers from the traffic stop has a long list of complaints, and her boss just straight up tells her that there probably won't be any consequences.
I'm gonna push for disciplinary action, but most likely there'll be no real consequences for their actions. None that will feel satisfying. Excessive force. Unlawful search and seizure, violation of civil liberties. Yeah, the problem is he always stops just short of doing something truly awful, so none of it sticks.
Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily unrealistic, but it is weird that the show doesn't really acknowledge that clear systemic problem with Athena's job. None of that gets addressed or rectified by the end of the episode. Athena ends up taking personal revenge on the cop by pulling him over and giving him a talking to, but none of the systemic problem problems have been addressed. The episode established that this guy had a documented history of unlawful policing, and that because of the way the system is set up, he probably won't face any consequences for any of the numerous complaints he's received. And the show just doesn't question that. No one tries to effect any change. It doesn't make Athena question her profession in the slightest.
How can you be a cop when they treat black people like this?
It is not all cops, May. The good outnumber the bad.
This episode tries to ask the question of why cops are like this and what should be done about it, but because they don't have the guts to say anything truly critical of policing as an institution, they have to do this weak, wishy-washy apologia that in no way addresses the actual problem and makes Athena look like a willfully ignorant coward who won't even stand up for her own family if it means questioning the people she works for. It's so bizarre. The episode has Michael sit Harry down to give him the talk about how, as a young black person, he's going to have to know how to navigate confrontations with the police safely. And in the same episode, Athena tells us that the police are not the enemy, that it's not us versus them.
The police are not the enemy, all right? It's not us versus them.
How can both of those things be true? How can police not be the enemy, not have any systemic problems worth addressing, be an acceptable institution to dedicate one's life to, and also be so inherently, perpetually violent toward black people that it's expected that you'd have to sit your son down and explain to him that cops are going to treat him differently, potentially to the point of deadly force, because he's black? I don't think those are two things that can be reconciled. It's a messy, messy storyline, and one of the show's lowest points, in my opinion. This is one of my biggest problems with the show's handling of cops. By bringing up issues like this at all, they open this huge, contradictory can of worms that they can never close again. Some people might disagree with me on this, but in my opinion, if you're going to make a show that is ultimately pro-cop, a show that depicts cops in a positive light, I feel like it's best to just not even touch the systemic issues with policing, because as soon as you bring that up, you kind of lose all your credibility. Police brutality is indefensible. The systemic racism of the police is indefensible. And once you lay it out in front of the viewer, it's now kind of hard to justify one of your characters being a cop. If the show just had a cop who was depicted as good, I could suspend my disbelief. I could pretend this show exists in a world where cops aren't so bad, and I could use my critical thinking skills to acknowledge that that isn't true of the real world, but that this is a Copagandist TV show. Instead, by acknowledging the actual corrupt nature of the police, they've created a situation that fundamentally doesn't make sense. A world of characters who are simultaneously aware of the institutional horrors of policing, but have no choice but to prop up policing as an unquestionable good. Schrodinger's racism. It's lame, and I hate it. While we're on the topic, there's also this really mean-spirited episode in season 5 that randomly incorporates an autonomous cop-free zone into the story for the exclusive purpose of strawmanning it and making the people in it look crazy and stupid. This was presumably based on the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, later renamed the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest, a cop-free protest zone created in Seattle in 2020 in response to the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent police violence toward protesters. In the episode, the 118 has to respond to a call in the autonomous zone where someone's been shot, and the crazy, stupid idiots running it won't let them in, so Bobby has to force his way in like a total badass.
This wannabe mayor is blocking the way because of some stupid rules.
Since when do anarchists have rules?
Get out!
Adapt or die.
No rules here.
This was likely inspired by the 2 people who were shot and killed within or near the Capitol Hill occupied protest in 2020. The popular narrative at the time was that the zone had not allowed police and medics to enter the area and help the victims.
On Saturday night, upon entering the CHOP, they were met with a hostile crowd that prevented them from getting to the victims. Because we couldn't guarantee the safety for the first responders to enter, neither officers or medics were able to get there and treat the wounded.
But KUOW investigated this back in 2020 and found that police didn't enter the scene at all until 20 minutes after the shooting due to a miscommunication between police and fire. They actually couldn't find any evidence that protesters kept first responders from entering. That idea began to circulate when the president of the Seattle Police Officer Guild went on Fox News after the incident and claimed it was the case.
One of our community members lost their life, and police are still not allowed into that area, and were prevented to providing that police service to the area to locate victims and or render aid.
So I feel like it's kind of irresponsible to peddle the Fox News narrative even after it's been credibly debunked, but whatever. Later in the episode, Athena has to track down the evil guy who's kidnapped her son and is now hiding in the zone, so she lies her way in.
And you need protection?
Actually, I do. From who? An animal. With a badge.
And then as she's on the phone taunting the bad guy, he says to her that the people in the autonomous zone are all dirty criminals and thieves.
What about all these innocent civilians?
Innocent? Really? They commandeered 8 city blocks. They're hardly innocent, they're thieves.
And the first time I watched it, I actually thought that maybe this would be a moment where the show gives some counterpoint, like having Athena disagree with him and be like, I may not agree with them on everything, but I have more in common with them than I do with you, a serial rapist and murderer. Or at least have her point out that he's in no position to be judging people for being criminals. But no, instead, she just agrees with him.
They're hardly innocent, they're thieves.
Well, whatever they are, I don't think they'll take too kindly to a dirty cop killing someone in the middle of their people's paradise.
Why would they have her agree with the evil rapist and murderer? Did they literally just want to throw in one more dig at the people running this autonomous zone? There's also a moment in this episode where a cop refers to women who take videos of cops behaving badly as Karens.
May gets alerts of videos of cops acting out.
Wow. I never thought I would say this, but thank God for nosy Karens and their Twitter accounts.
Which is just a bizarre misuse of that term, since it was largely popularized in reference to white women who weaponized the police, not ones who criticized them. Once again, I kind of wish the show would just leave topics like police brutality alone, because they're not doing themselves any favors by trying to tackle them. And ultimately, while it doesn't completely ruin the show for me, the Copaganda is definitely a stain on the otherwise pretty good messaging of this show. The other big thing on my bad list is a less serious but more pervasive problem, and that's the inconsistency of 911. There's actually something of a lore regarding the perceived good and bad seasons of this show, and in classic fandom fashion, it has to do with ascribing a probably unrealistic amount of creative control to the showrunners. The first 4 seasons of 911 had Tim Minear as showrunner. After this, Minear left to run 911 Lone Star, and seasons 5 and 6 of the OG show were taken over by writer Kristen Rydell. And interestingly, Minear actually returned as showrunner for the most recent season, season 7. From what I have observed in the fandom, most fans basically consider Tim Minear to be the good showrunner and Kristen Rydell to be the bad showrunner. Honestly, I was a little skeptical of this as soon as I heard about it. In general, I'm always wary of these fandom truths that appear to be based almost entirely on vibes. I talked about this briefly in my recent video on the Steric ship, that sometimes fans create these very personal narratives about the people who make their favorite shows, and these narratives can be, at worst, genuinely mean and hostile, and at best, unrealistic and speculative. When you really like a show, it can be tempting to want to find someone to either praise or blame for all the things you like and dislike about it. The reality that TV is a heavily collaborative medium is not nearly as satisfying as finding a hero and villain. I also have to say, fandoms can be very misogynistic, so I'm also a little wary of this whole framing that the good male showrunner can do no wrong and the evil female showrunner ruined the show. But more importantly, I just think there's plenty of evidence that this is a false dichotomy. For the remainder of the bad section, I'd like to explore the weaker seasons and moments on this show, partially through this lens of the showrunner debate. There are good and bad things in both showrunners' seasons. I'd have more faith in this whole idea if it were just seasons 1 through 4 versus seasons 5 and 6, but now that season 7 exists, the idea that Tim Minear is the decidedly good showrunner holds even less water in my opinion. So yes, seasons 1 through 4, especially seasons 2 through 4, are arguably the show's golden age as of yet. Fans are generally less into seasons 5, 6, and 7. I agree that seasons 1 through 4 are a little stronger than the latter seasons, and I certainly agree that seasons 6 and 7 are weaker seasons. I do think season 5 is somewhat unfairly maligned. I think it's actually pretty strong overall. I can understand why some fans dislike it, because it does include a lot of status quo changes. As I touched on earlier, Maddie and Chimney are absent for part of the season, 2 new firefighters are introduced to the 118, Eddie leaves the 118 at one point, so it definitely switches things up and has a different vibe at times, but I personally don't think any of those things are inherently negative. I think the show is perfectly enjoyable regardless. I've already said I don't love the character of Lucy, but there are plenty of things I do like the Jonas storyline, Maddie and Chimney's emotional journey throughout the season, even if it involves them leaving for a while. Eddie's storyline is not perfect, but more involved than the Eddie storylines we usually get. And a lot of fans hate Taylor, so maybe they don't like how Taylor-heavy the season is, but as I've already said, I like Taylor, so skill issue, I guess. So that's my strike one against the Tim versus Kristen debate. I think season 5 is fine, so that's one good Kristen-led season. I do think season 6 is weak. This season is just kind of blah overall. There aren't a lot of consequential storylines in this one. Athena has this big season opener storyline in her hometown where she solves a decades-old mystery, and I do like that episode, but that's about it for Athena's season 6 storyline. Bobby has that dramatic storyline where he investigates the mysterious death of his AA sponsor, but I think that one's kind of rushed. I think they could have drawn it out longer than they did and maybe given Bobby more emotional consequences from it. Chimney and Maddie have their engagement storyline at the end of the season, which is fine. I enjoyed it enough, but that's about it for them. Hen quits med school early in the season, which is kind of annoying and anticlimactic since they've built up that storyline for so long, but I understand why they couldn't ultimately have Hen leave the 118. That would have broken up the show quite a bit. But even so, it's not like it's my fault as the viewer that they wrote themselves into a corner, so it would have been nice to see them come up with a more satisfying conclusion to that storyline. Eddie has almost nothing this season. Don't worry about him. Literally, his only major beat is deciding he's ready to date again by the end of the season. Great. Set Eddie loose again to terrorize more women. That's what he needs. Buck actually has some of the worst stuff in season 6, in my opinion. His are the storylines that annoy me the most in this one. It's weird, right? Because I've said that I think Buck is one of the best written characters on the show, but in season 6, he really falls flat. He starts the season saying that he's looking for something, that he needs some kind of fulfillment in his life, and he's not sure what.
You don't think I'm at ease?
I think the important thing is that you answer that question for yourself.
This could have been a good lead-in to the Bye Buck storyline, but that doesn't happen until season 7, so in retrospect, it's honestly not entirely clear what he's supposed to be talking about here in season 6.
What are you looking for now?
That's what I'm gonna find out by opening myself up to possibility.
I think they meant for it to be the sperm donation storyline that gives him said fulfillment. Buck's old friend approaches him early in season 6 and asks if Buck will be the sperm donor for him and his wife.
We wanted to know if you'd consider being our sperm donor.
It seems weird to ask a real-life acquaintance instead of just going to a sperm bank, but whatever. They ask him, and Buck eventually agrees. So I don't like this storyline, and when I first watched it, I couldn't put my finger on why. But on my rewatch, I've realized that it's a pretty simple, uncomplicated reason. I just think this arc is really boring and ultimately not very consequential. When the characters are first setting this up, it's incredibly dull. Every scene dedicated to it is like sitting in on someone's therapy session.
Giving this a lot of thought, thinking about, where I am in my life and what I want and how this would fit in with that.
And this show regularly shows characters actually going to therapy, and it's less boring than this, so that's saying something. And then, as the storyline progresses, you keep expecting there to be complications, conflict, maybe Buck struggling with the idea of detaching himself from this baby that will be biologically his. But no, it kind of just goes off without a hitch, and Buck's totally cool about it the whole time. They try to inject some conflict by having the couple break up at one point and having the wife come stay at Buck's house, but we hardly know these people, so you can't bring yourself to care too much when they're having relationship problems. And I think having the wife move in with Buck is just an excuse to have her go into labor at his place so he can emotionally deliver the baby. This leads to actually the only part of this entire storyline that I like. I think this moment where Buck clearly feels conflicted for a second, but then puts his feelings aside and passes on the baby to Cameron is genuinely emotional. Oliver Stark is such a great actor, and you can see the whole journey he goes on in a few seconds just through his face. It's good. But then they even ruin that by having Buck's death doula hype woman set-dressing girlfriend just say all that out loud later in the episode, while telling Buck how cool and epic he is, obviously.
I saw the way you looked at that baby, and then watched you give him away, and I still don't understand why you did that for them.
So any nice subtlety that scene had is ruined. Bad storyline. But that's not it for Buck. There's also the episode where he gets struck by lightning and has an It's a Wonderful Life-style alternate reality coma dream.
It's a wonderful life. Yeah, I don't know how wonderful it is. It feels kind of crappy.
No, the movie, It's a Wonderful Life.
Buck dies for 3 minutes, and then he's in a coma for a while afterward, and he has this fantasy where he's in a universe where his older brother didn't die in childhood, and consequently Buck never became a firefighter, and everything in his life is different because of that. Maddie is still with her abusive ex, Eddie lost custody of his son and left the 118, Bobby is dead. Ooh.
Bobby Nash is dead.
This episode sucks so hard. I think it's one of the worst episodes of the show. It sucks because despite presenting itself as this consequential, introspective character episode, it accomplishes absolutely nothing, doesn't tell us anything new or interesting about Buck, and doesn't require Buck to change or grow or learn at all. This could have been a worthwhile episode if Buck was struggling or conflicted in some way before getting struck by lightning, but no, before this happens, he's just totally fine. He's good old Buck. No problems. Thriving, even. He's doing the sperm donation thing, and no problems have arisen. He's happy with his life. He's happy with the way things are going in his life.
I'm happy with my life. I'm happy with the way things are going in my life.
This episode is clearly inspired by Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. And I want to remind you that in It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey doesn't have his vision of a world without him in it for no reason. His guardian angel shows it to him because he's at his lowest possible point. He's been brought to his knees by life. He's about to kill himself. The point of seeing the world if he'd never been born is to show him how meaningful his life is, how good of a person he is, how all his sacrifices have directly helped other people and made the world a better place.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.
But in this episode of 911, Buck doesn't have any lesson to learn, any problem to solve, any journey to go on. He's doing fine before it happens, and he's doing fine after. So this is a futile exercise from the beginning. The ensuing episode just feels like a string of shock value moments meant to make the audience go, ooh, and nothing more.
Doug. What else were you expecting?
Yes, it's momentarily shocking to imagine a world where Buck's brother is alive, or Bobby is dead, or Maddie never escaped from Doug, but so what? Those things didn't happen, and imagining them happening changes nothing about anything. So why does it matter? Why should I care? There's this moment where evil fantasy Bobby says this.
If what matters to you most is how other people see you, then you haven't learned a damn thing.
Is that supposed to be the point of the episode? I don't think Buck's problem has ever been worrying too much about how others perceive him. When has that ever been true of him? It's just sloppy. It's really weird. I can't imagine what they thought they were accomplishing with this. So all in all, I think season 6 struggles with storylines that are superficially important but don't actually change anything or go anywhere, big plot elements that the show moves on from too quickly, and a surplus of external conflicts versus internal. For example, the finale of the season is largely about this freeway overpass disaster, and while I think it's fun and exciting, the episode is conspicuously less concerned with character development than you'd think a season finale would be. But to be fair, I do think part of why season 6 feels a little half-baked is something I mentioned earlier, which is that the production seemed unsure of whether the show would get picked up for another season, so I think they were kind of scrambling to try and make the season feel conclusive and not leave any loose ends, and maybe that sometimes took priority over telling really good stories. It's not an excuse, but I think it's part of why it would be fair to say maybe season 6 isn't the best example of Kristen Rydell's typical work. Also, to be absolutely fair, Rydell did not write a single episode of season 6. I know she was showrunner, she was in the writer's room, obviously she had plenty of input, but, you know, for the record, she didn't personally pen any of these episodes. And to be even fairer, Rydell has written some very good episodes throughout the show, in my opinion. She wrote the finale of season 4, which I think is really strong. She co-wrote the episode with the shark on the freeway. That's a pretty iconic one for me. She wrote the final showdown between Maddie and Doug, the opener of season 3, the Jonah serial killer episode that I love so much. She did also write the Autonomous Zone episode, so not perfect, but in general I think her episodes are pretty strong. I tried looking into why the fandom hates her so much. I found this Reddit post, and to be quite honest, it seems like a significant amount of the hate comes from like one interview where she implied that she wasn't interested in making the show's most popular gay ship canon. What a surprise! Tim Minear was open to the possibility of shipping Buddie. Kristen Rydell put the kibosh on that. That's one reason people aren't fond of her, especially the LGBTQ community. This person's implying that she's like homophobic for not shipping this popular non-canon ship. This is one of the things that's so annoying about fandom. I'm a fandom person, don't get mad at me, and don't assume that I'm disagreeing with this because I dislike the ship or something. At risk of spoiling the rest of this video, it will soon be clear that that is not the case. But one thing I hate about shipping fandom is how it distorts reality for people. Shippers victimize themselves sometimes, and they feel the need to morally justify all their opinions, so a showrunner expressing an opinion that is not outwardly supportive of their ship becomes a showrunner being homophobic, antagonizing the LGBTQ community, ignoring the fact that this show has a canonically lesbian main character who is married to a woman, and that couple got some of their best, most involved moments in the seasons run by Kristen Rydell. So anyway, it does seem like a big part of why so many fans hate Rydell is that she did not support the show's flagship ship. Even if this complaint were somehow valid, Rydell's episodes have actually given us some of the most iconic Buck and Eddie moments, so I don't really get what you guys are complaining about. If I may continue my defense of Kristen Rydell, Exhibit B, Tim Minear's seasons are not perfect either. Even in his classic, well-liked seasons, I think there are some duds here and there. There's the cop stuff. The season 3 storyline where Eddie starts having anger issues and joins a fight club is really weak in my opinion. It comes out of nowhere. Eddie's writing in general was already quite bad before Rydell took over. I've already said how much I hate Shannon's death in season 2. I think that was a really cheap, lazy writing moment. But the most damning evidence is season 7. As I've been referencing for this entire video, season 7 is the messiest season of the show by far, and I dislike it immensely. The necessary context here is that the season was impacted by the writers and actors strikes this past fall, so the season was shortened to 10 episodes instead of the usual 18, and I believe they had a shorter turnaround time to get the season written and produced. I sympathize with this. I'm sure it was really difficult and disruptive to have to make a season of television under these circumstances, and it's impressive that they managed to accomplish as much as they did. However, I feel like if you're tasked with creating a shorter season in a shorter amount of time than usual, maybe the smart thing to do would have been to create a scaled-back season, something with a smaller scope than usual. Maybe focus more on the 911 calls and pick a couple of character storylines to explore, but save the rest for next season. Instead, bizarrely, Tim Minear appears to have wanted to stuff as many huge, consequential storylines into this short season as he could, and the result is a rushed, clunky, overwrought mess. The first 4 episodes or so are pretty good, in my opinion. The cruise ship disaster storyline is awesome. It's impressively large scale, especially with the limitations they had this season, and it's so full of camp and drama in a way that I love.
Thank you for choosing Oceana's Group.
And episode 4, the Buy Buck episode, is pretty good too. It feels well thought out in a way that the rest of the season largely doesn't. I like it, other than this extremely clunky Amazon product placement halfway through.
You order something from Amazon Prime?
Yeah, I did.
Here you go.
That was fast. Do I need to sign anything?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool.
But unfortunately, that's where the good stuff ends. Here's my theory. It feels like when they sat down to write this season, they just wrote, Bobby and Athena's cruise ship capsizes, and Buck is bisexual on a whiteboard or something. Those were the 2 storylines they planned in advance, and then everything else they came up with on the spot. After episode 4, every episode starts to feel like a first draft. The ideas are bizarre and come out of nowhere. Some ideas are okay, but have poor execution. The episodes will spend too much time on some things and not enough time on others. There's the Chimney and Maddie wedding episode, but instead of being focused on Chimney and Maddie's wedding, or any good emotional conflict between the two of them, it's just Chimney wandering around town with encephalitis and seeing dead people. It's not even a good mystery or anything. Much of the episode is just Chimney doing odd things, and then the other characters laboriously retracing everything he does and slowly figuring it out.
That's where you found his phone?
What is he doing?
Wait, he's getting on that bus?
Overall, I think it has the same problem as the Buck Lightning episode, where it's presented like a consequential character study, but ultimately tells us nothing new about Chimney or has him grow or change at all. Like Buck in that episode, Chimney was fine before this. He didn't have anything he needed to learn or figure out. There's no internal conflict here. There's a rather lame Criminal Minds-esque episode that's just characters tracking down a single crazed kidnapper. It doesn't give us much in the way of character stuff or fun 911 calls. Actually, one of my big problems with season 7 is that I don't think it has enough 911 calls. It focuses more on larger overarching storylines and character stuff, but let's be real, the show is called 911. I want to see all the stupid, ridiculous calls, and there really aren't a lot of them after the first few episodes. There's a Bobby-centric episode where he travels to Yakumba to confront Amir, the victim of his apartment fire, and they somehow get mixed up in the cartel. It's not the worst episode of the season, but I think involving the cartel was a mistake from the beginning. This culminates in the cartel burning down Bobby and Athena's house and almost killing Amir. Again, it's a huge dramatic storyline that's been condensed into a couple of episodes, and as a result feels rushed and unbelievable. Then, of course, there's Eddie's dead wife doppelganger storyline.
I mean, if I didn't know better, even I'd say this was me.
This might be my least favorite storyline in the entire show. I find it deeply unpleasant to watch. I don't think it tracks well with Eddie's larger character development. It feels weird that he's still hung up on his wife this many seasons in. It's weird to watch him cheat on his girlfriend. It's weird that he seemingly wasn't even really having problems with his girlfriend or feeling dissatisfied with his life in any way that would prompt him to do this. It's weird that there don't seem to be any mental or emotional consequences for Eddie from doing this, despite saying that he's worried about himself and that he's broken.
I'm worried about me too.
I'm broken.
Maybe they'll explore that in the next season, but since it's Eddie, I won't hold my breath. The monologue he gives when fake Shannon dresses up as real Shannon and encourages Eddie to vent his emotions to her is really bad. It meanders all over the place and doesn't reach a coherent conclusion, which isn't helped by the middling performance.
This is the life from now on. The life without you.
But at this point, I don't blame Ryan Guzman. How could anyone make material like this sound good?
You were supposed to be here with me, baby. I live in a freaking little storage closet.
This whole storyline is the kind of thing that crosses the line from sensational but grounded to downright unbelievable. It feels like a bottom-of-the-barrel soap opera storyline, not something that would happen on this show.
Mom?
There's also the ridiculous storyline where a city councilwoman sabotages Hen and Karen's adoption of their foster child because Hen didn't treat her son, who died after refusing treatment. This is another thing that just feels like too much. It's not believable. I know politicians are evil, but I have a hard time buying this level of openly, cartoonishly evil. And finally, the season ends with this twist of sorts that Bobby, who resigned from his job late in the season during a sort of mental health crisis, has not been allowed back, and has instead been replaced by Captain Gerard, the extremely bigoted former captain of the 118, whom we first met in Hen and Chimney's backstory episodes. If I had a nickel for every TV show I've covered on my channel that features a bigoted old guy villain named Gerard, I'd have 2 nickels. So this is supposed to be a big shock moment when we realize that the 118 is gonna have to deal with this racist, sexist, homophobic guy next season.
Line up an inspection in 10.
I don't know, man. This just feels like a mid-season cliffhanger to me, not an end-of-season cliffhanger. It's just a little silly. I don't really see how this guy could be so overtly awful to everyone he works with and still have a job. In the aforementioned backstory episodes, we saw him get suspended due to all the complaints he had against him. I thought the assumption there was that he would probably be fired. I mean, after all, this is the fire department, not the police department. I'll be curious to see how this plays out in the next season, but like a lot of other things in season 7, it just feels like another shark to be jumped, and not even in a fun way. I hate it all so passionately. I think Tim Minear should be in jail for making me watch the latter half of this season. This alone is enough to thoroughly debunk this whole Tim versus Kristen debate for me. If this is Tim Minear's 911, I don't want it. Throughout the season, it kind of feels like Minear is retooling and almost retconning things to get the show back to a place he likes. He gets rid of Buck's girlfriend off screen. He regresses Athena and Bobby back to conflicts they worked through multiple seasons ago. He regresses Eddie back to not being over Shannon. This is another one of those things where it's not my problem if Tim Minear doesn't like where the show has ended up. If he wanted to adjust things, he should have done it in a more natural way. Hastily rearranging things like this feels self-indulgent. He's gonna have to do some work to get me back into this show in season 8. I'm hoping and praying that the schedule being back to normal will give them enough time and space to even things out, but oh man, this season does not bode well. That being said, they had me at B-Tornado.
It's a B-NATO.
I'm going into season 8 with an open mind, but they're on thin ice. Ultimately, while I've enjoyed most of the show, the quality is not always consistent, especially in the last couple years, and I think this Tim versus Kristen debate is really stupid, and the hate for Kristen Rydell is petty and overblown. The inconsistency sounds like it's less because of one good showrunner versus one bad showrunner, and more because of unfortunate external circumstances, and perhaps the stress of going back and forth between showrunners like this. But now that we've covered the essentials of the show, some of the plot, the ups and downs, let's get into the really fun stuff. Obviously, the actual 911 calls make up a lot of 911.
911, what's your emergency?
This is really the show's bread and butter, these absurd emergency calls, many of them, from what I can tell, inspired by real-life freak accidents and phenomena. A couple months ago, I tried watching an episode of Rescue 911, the classic docudrama series about real-life 911 calls, and in the very first episode, I recognized one of the calls as a call that had been dramatized on 911. So I would guess Rescue 911 is one of the sources they pull from, but I'm sure they go through all sorts of old news reports and urban legends and whatnot to come up with a lot of these. The sensational 911 calls have also become very popular in the YouTube and TikTok clip world. The official Fox and now ABC YouTube channels frequently post clips of the calls from 911 and 911 Lone Star, and these videos can rack up millions of views. They're probably making a good amount of money on the side by doing this. And that's not even accounting for all the unofficial channels getting absolutely unreal views by ripping clips of 911 into YouTube shorts. Woman went blind overnight due to yoga. Hashtag 911. I've already described the forms that the calls usually take and how effective they are, but now I'd like to take some time to just detail some of my favorite zany calls from throughout the series. In season 1, there's this episode showing the supposed phenomenon of emergency calls getting weirder and more frequent around the full moon. And one of the calls they respond to in this episode is a woman going into labor at a pregnancy yoga class. When the 118 get there and start delivering the baby, other women keep going into labor, and soon there are like 4 different women in labor at the same time.
They say when a full moon's halfway between the eastern horizon and its highest point, it can induce labor.
Season 2 features one of my favorite calls of all time. This one is less about the actual emergency and more about the scenario surrounding the call. This happens during the season's Halloween episode. You guys know I love a Halloween episode, and this show has a few of them. So the 118 gets a call from a climber who's fallen in the mountains. They go to the scene and find a climber in distress, but this climber says he didn't call 911.
I dropped my phone when I went over. I didn't call 911.
Meanwhile, Buck and Eddie find skeletal remains near the scene, remains that appear to be several years old. Next to the skeleton is an iPhone. Can you see where they're going with this?
How do you think a ghost called 911?
A ghost called 911.
Bobby says he thinks a ghost called 911.
A ghost called 911, huh?
How do you think a ghost called 911?
I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure this is never disproven. Athena ends up figuring out who the dead hiker was and bringing closure to his family, but the whole idea that a ghost called 911 appears to just be what happened.
We both know a ghost called 911.
Iconic. Season 2 also features my beloved shark on the freeway call.
A man's been attacked by a shark.
What beach are you on, ma'am?
We're not on the beach, we're on the freeway.
A shark was being transported in a tank to be released when the truck crashed. They use the jaws of life to pry open the jaws of the shark.
Jaws! Right. All right, those jaws. Jaws!
I love this one for obvious reasons, and I especially love that after rescuing the guy from the shark, the 118 takes it into their own hands to transport and release the shark, Free Willy style. Imagine seeing this pass you on the road. Another one of my favorites from this season is when this teacher is chaperoning a school field trip to a chocolate factory and becomes so enamored with the chocolate liquor he sampled that he accidentally falls into a vat of chocolate.
I'm calling from the Seymour Chocolate Factory in El Segundo. My colleague is drowning in dark chocolate.
The chocolate liquor is so viscous that it starts acting like chocolate quicksand.
Great, so basically chocolate quicksand.
Better yet, the 118 decides that the best way to get him out is to reduce the viscosity by pouring more cocoa butter into the mixture. A very whimsical rescue. I just love it.
Keep mixing, it's working!
Season 2 has so many great calls. In the Season 2 finale, this influencer is live streaming and decides to pop a pimple on her live. Warning, this one is pretty gross if you're squeamish. She starts popping what she thinks is a big pimple, and it turns out to be a maggot. The shock of this makes her fall over and break her clavicle, which is what makes her call 911.
Siri! Call 911!
When the 118 gets there, the live stream is still going, and you can see all the comments in the chat are like thirsting over Buck and Eddie. I have a whole list in my notes of all the numerous times the show makes what I call Buck and Eddie are hot jokes.
Are you boys single? You guys are pretty jacked. What kind of workout do you do?
Anyway, it turns out she had a bot fly.
They'll be able to extract the rest at the hospital.
The rest?
Think of them as new followers.
Part of it is that I just love when media like this tries to depict influencers and modern online culture. There's another episode that I've referenced already where these guys are filming some sort of David Dobrik or Paul Brothers type YouTube video where they dare their friend to encase his head in a microwave full of cement.
Yeah, we need help. My friend got a microwave stuck to his head.
These characters actually return in a later episode, this time making the same friend ride on a playground carousel really fast, which makes his eyes pop out of his head.
Hey, can you hear me? Oh!
The moral of both stories is that this guy has really terrible friends, but I love the attempted commentary on YouTubers.
Hello, Shay's Army.
Wait, what the hell, man? What are you doing?
Goodbye, Shay Army!
In the season 3 Halloween episode, another great Halloween episode, these mischievous kids are causing a lot of mayhem on a field trip to an apple orchard, including bullying a crow. This prompts a whole murder of vengeful crows to attack the two boys. I love the Halloween ambiance, I love crows, I love corvids of all sorts. I love that this incident makes Chimney spend the whole episode worried that he's been cursed by the crows. Season 3 also includes a crashed hazardous materials recycling truck. So there's a huge radioactive fire burning in this tunnel that ends up exposing Bobby to a dangerous amount of radiation. I just love the drama of this. I love that this call has Eddie shouting things like, "This entire tunnel's gonna turn into Chernobyl."
That magnesium's gonna burn through those drums. Once that happens, this entire tunnel is gonna turn into Chernobyl.
What happened to this Eddie? He's really knowledgeable about nuclear waste in this one episode and then never again. There's this other call in season 3 where a woman with a toothache takes an excessive amount of benzocaine, and the next morning she has turned blue.
Let me direct you to the mental health hotline.
Oh, damn it! I'm literally blue!
Apparently this is a thing that can happen. I don't know, but it's funny. Oh my god, there's this call in this season where a guy wants to confess his love to his crush at a restaurant they both frequent. He's never actually spoken to this guy, but he's decided that this will be the day that he finally does.
Seize the day.
But right as he's about to talk to him, he walks throat first into a bunch of metal poles. His crush rushes over to help him, but now he can't talk because the poles hit his throat too hard. His friend, the waitress at the restaurant, ends up reading the handwritten love note he had meant to leave for the guy, and all is well. Again, a very whimsical call.
No man is an island, but two men together can share the world.
The season 4 premiere includes this huge mudslide, and as a result of the mudslide, the Hollywood sign falls. It's great. You gotta go for the big, memorable imagery. This is just a minor thing, but in Buck's backstory episode in season 4, part of the framing device is the 118 fighting a fire in a hand sanitizer factory.
Hand sanitizer factory. 32 workers inside, we've accounted for 20.
This is funny to me because of the way they clearly tried to think of what the most disastrous possible location for a fire would be. Just a warehouse full of rubbing alcohol.
The place is packed with flammable, so basically, it's a minefield in there.
In the opening of season 5, ransomware attackers wreak havoc on the city of Los Angeles, and one of the things they do is open up the gates of the zoo, unleashing all the animals into the city. This culminates in Bobby and Hen facing off with a crazed alpaca in a loose parody of Jurassic Park.
Clever girl.
In the season 5 finale, a woman goes to her hairstylist with a splitting headache, demanding he take out her extensions. The stylist faints upon seeing whatever's going on with her head. Someone calls 911 to attend to the hairstylist, but as they're responding to the call, they also help this woman and find that her head is full of maggots. Sorry about all the maggot stuff. I guess that makes for good TV. When they realize her extensions are infested with maggots, the hairstylist admits that he's been sourcing the hair from dead bodies in a funeral home.
Where did you get the hair?
I like the cascading nature of this call. It's kind of like the Final Destination thing I was talking about earlier. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but in the episode where we meet Marisol, her brother is trying to do DIY foam insulation in her attic, but he ends up accidentally encasing himself in insulation. Like I said before, this is funny partly because of the bad CGI, but also the 118 has no choice but to bring him out to the ambulance encased in this slab of insulation, like he's Han Solo in Carbonite. In one episode, there's a lightning storm happening. I think it's the same episode where Buck eventually gets struck by lightning. And there's this Uber carrying a pregnant woman in labor to the nearest hospital. However, the car gets struck by lightning and falls off of an overpass, which somehow ejects the baby right out of the woman's womb.
Could the baby have been ejected?
Yeah, if she was dilated enough.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Why not? And finally, although season 7 didn't have enough 911 calls for my liking, probably the highlight of the season for me was the Bachelor parody call. You see, 911 made the move to ABC this past season, and what other property does ABC own? That's right, reality dating competition show The Bachelor. So when they got their paws on 911, I guess they saw the opportunity for a crossover and took it. At the top of this episode, we open on what appears to just be an episode of The Bachelor. Specifically, they use the real-life season 28 Bachelor, Joey. I do watch The Bachelor and Bachelorette sometimes. I watched the most recent season of The Bachelorette, and I watched Charity's season where Joey was introduced, but I admit I did not watch Joey's season. However, I think this 911 crossover is really funny. So it opens like a regular night one of The Bachelor. Host Jesse Palmer is getting Joey ready to meet the dozens of contestants lined up for him. We see him meet a few women in the usual way. The only thing I'll say in terms of the realism of this sequence is that if you've watched The Bachelor, there is a clear different feel to these women who are hired actors as opposed to real-life contestants.
I'm a flight attendant, so Joey's gonna have to earn his wings with me.
I don't know how else to describe it, but you can tell they're acting. But I can suspend my disbelief. I know it's an episode of 911. I thought the details here were great. I love how they gave the contestants silly, fake-sounding jobs in their little name cards, because that's how it always is on The Bachelor. So after meeting a few women, a new limo screeches onto the premises, and this very nervous woman comes out with a bottle of glue and introduces herself.
My name is Conchata, and I'm stuck on you.
She's acting suspicious. At this point, the illusion breaks and we zoom out a little bit on the production.
Guys, are we sure that this is Conchata?
Does anyone know who that woman is?
The girl proceeds to glue herself to the patio of the Bachelor mansion. It turns out this woman is not actually a contestant. She knocked out the real contestant and took her place because she's always wanted to be on The Bachelor.
I have dreamed of this moment since I was 21 years old.
Maddie answers the 911 call, and it's revealed that Maddie and her silent movie actor work bestie Josh are members of Bachelor Nation, so all they're concerned with is finding out the identity of the next Bachelor.
Jesse, hi. My name's Josh, and I'm the supervising dispatcher here. Can you describe the state of this season's Bachelor for me?
Maddie sends the 118, of course, and they jackhammer this woman out of the floor of the Bachelor mansion. They can't resist using this situation as an opportunity for another Buck and Eddie are hot joke.
If we don't get lucky in the mansion, we might have a better chance at the fire station. I love Dalmatians.
And Joey wipes a tear from the girl's face. I thought this was really fun. It's obviously more fun if you've seen The Bachelor, but such is the purpose of a crossover, right? I was actually impressed by Joey's acting ability. Obviously, he's just playing himself, but he still had to deliver lines convincingly, and I think he did a good job.
Come visit me in prison!
Do I have to? I would not.
So there you have it. Those are some of my top tier favorite 911 calls on the show. But I did leave out a lot of good ones. I don't want this video to be a replacement for watching the show. You should watch it, and then you can form your own opinions about what the best 911 calls are. I can only hope that Season 8's promised B NATO will become my next favorite 911 call. Okay, this might seem like an odd section to include, and it's going to be very short, but I couldn't think of where else to talk about this. Like most network shows, before each season and right after each episode airs, 911 airs a short promo for the upcoming episode. And there are like 2 promos that are so funny to me for various reasons. They're both from Season 7. Season 7 was one of the first seasons I was able to watch live, so I think I just ended up seeing more promos from this season. Maybe if I'd watched the others live, I'd also have favorites from those seasons. The first is one of the promos for the 3-part cruise ship premiere. This promo begins with this really odd exchange. It feels weird because it's clearly dialogue that's been spliced together from various lines in the episode, exclusively for the promo.
Let's go lay by the pool and enjoy our beautiful honeymoon cruise together.
I'll get my bathing suit and I will meet you there in 10 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Watching the season, I always try to listen for the actual lines that the promo dialogue might have been cut from.
I thought we could start simple. Go lay by the pool. I hate to ruin the only fun you seem to be having on our honeymoon cruise, but nobody's been murdered. Here we are enjoying this cruise together. Let's go lay by the pool and enjoy our beautiful honeymoon cruise together.
It makes Bobby sound like a robot or something. Then we see the cruise ship being taken over by Russian cruise hijackers? ?
They come and nobody will be hurt.
I don't know enough about cruise hijacking, if such a thing exists, to know if it's realistic for them to be Russian. This was ridiculous when I saw it in the promo, and it was ridiculous when I watched it in the episode. Then we get Jennifer Love Hewitt's Valley Girl delivery of this line.
Bobby and Athena's cruise ship might be missing.
Bobby and Athena's cruise ship might be missing. The half-second cut to Buck and Eddie just to remind fans that they're in this show too. Then there's the extremely melodramatic music choice.
I'm looking for my wife. Where is she?
Saving the ship.
I'm looking for my wife. Where is she? Saving the ship. So funny, so over the top. This promo doesn't just bolster the show it's promoting, it is a work of art in and of itself. The other promo I'm thinking of is the promo for Season 7, Episode 5. This is the episode directly after the Buy Buck episode, and much of the promo is concerned with the aftermath of that storyline.
Wow, this was so great. You're a little tense. This is my first date with a dude.
There's exactly one reason this promo is forever etched in my memory. Fans of the show might already know what I'm talking about.
Tommy! Hey! Buck! You 2 guys are together! Buck!
Buck! Why is it so loud? He completely blows out the levels. I swear to God, in the actual episode, this line is not that loud. It's mixed normally.
Tommy! Hey! Buck! Tommy! Hey! Buck!
So they must have intentionally boosted that one word. For some reason?
Buck!
This is so funny to me. I can't stop thinking about it. You can hear the echo, like it's shaking the room he's in. It's also the way Buck turns around with this look of genuine horror on his face. Again, a promo so good it transcends its form as mere promotional material and creates meaning of its own.
Buck!
While we're at it, I would like to share with you my personal 911 drinking game rules. I've been painstakingly curating this list over my last 2 years of viewing. As always, this could always be repurposed into a bingo card or just a funny non-alcoholic game, no sweat. So number 1, the 118 has just sat down to dinner or another peaceful activity or maybe an intense conversation when they get interrupted by a call. Self-explanatory. Jennifer Love Hewitt cries either during or right after a 911 call. It happens truly all the time. Probably at least 60% of the calls Maddie takes involve tears. Like I said earlier, Jennifer Love Hewitt is just a great crier. Similarly, Maddie answers a call and tells the caller she's having trouble hearing them.
I can barely hear you, sir. Can you tell me precisely where on the trail?
Athena does something unethical on the job. Sorry, but it's true.
Some skanky teenage hoe living up in here bringing a real stank to the neighborhood.
White wine on screen. I noticed at some point that there's a lot of white wine on this show. If someone on the show is drinking, more often than not, it's white wine. I even started taking note of every white wine moment.
You want a glass of wine?
I do.
Part of me wonders if this is related to that thing I mentioned in my last Lifetime video, where I said that it seems like fake red wine is harder to do on TV for whatever reason. Maybe white wine is just easier to fake visually. Me, I'm having a beautiful Chardonnay from Naked Wines. Use my link in description to get $100 off. I'm milking this for everything I can. Next, a main or recurring character is perilously injured or ill. Happens all the time, as we've established. There's a Buck and Eddie are hot joke.
If we don't get lucky in the mansion, we might have a better chance at the fire station.
A character either attends therapy or mentions therapy.
What's your secret?
Therapy.
Hen provides random but specific knowledge pertaining to the call at hand.
That thing is like 10 feet long. Its constriction strength is like 50 pounds per square inch.
Oh my God, I'm gonna start calling you Snakeopedia. Stop it.
And finally, comically on-the-nose music choice. I know that might be subjective. I'll leave it up to player discretion. Do let me know if you have any other ideas for rules that I didn't think of. But there's still one thing I haven't mentioned outright yet. I've sort of alluded to it, but that's it. You see, this whole time I actually haven't been alone. There's been someone else in the room with me. It's an elephant. There's a reason this show has taken off online in a way that shows like Tracker seemingly haven't. There's a reason certain fans hate Kristen Rydell for expressing a really quite tame perspective in an interview one time. And there's a reason I had no choice but to get back into this show when I heard about the Buy Buck episode. You see, 911 has a shipping fan base. A big one, centered around everyone's favorite non-threatening himbos, our boys Buck and Eddie.
You guys should take this act on the road.
That's how I feel. The ship name is Buddie. Obviously, fans of this show will probably agree that a discussion of 911 would not be complete without a discussion of Buddie. It seems like this show would not have nearly as much of an online fandom were it not for this ship. And in the past, when I've talked about shipping on my channel, like when I made my Steric video or my social network fanfiction video, I've always tried to approach these topics with a sort of detached bemusement. This was partly an actual reflection of my feelings. I can't say I'm a huge Steric or Jesse Eisenberg, Andrew Garfield shipper. But if I'm honest, it was also to try and maintain some air of professionality. I guess I felt like if I allowed myself to become too attached to those ships, or even to be completely honest about whatever attachment I felt, I would be written off as a crazy, dumb shipper or something. I thought I would damage my credibility and embarrass myself. But in this case, regardless of how much I might end up embarrassing myself, I can't pretend that I'm not invested. That would simply be dishonest. I'm sorry if there are any Buddie haters watching this, but the truth is, I ship it. I'm currently in the trenches with the rest of them. I'm clowning hard, I'm making playlists, I'm in it deep. So I feel like I have no choice but to tell you a little bit about this ship and why I think they should just go for it. You can skip this section if you're not into this kind of thing, but just so you know, that would be kind of lame and cowardly of you. So why does Buddie appeal to me so much? In addition to the textual stuff, which I'll cover in a minute, I think part of me finds this ship nostalgic in a way. Buddie feels like a classic shipper's ship. It brings me back to 2010's Tumblr, when everybody was obsessed with 2 or 3 non-canon gay ships that were just 2 boring men. Maybe one had light hair and one had dark hair, and you just dedicated your life to it with no shame or overthinking. Now that I'm older, it feels like there's a lot of discourse and cringe culture and embarrassment that comes with shipping. It's lost some of its simple sweetness. But in shipping Buddie, I feel like I'm healing my inner child. Buddie is uncomplicated. Just 2 giant hot guys who have a really intense homoerotic relationship, which has straightforwardly prompted mass gay shipping. As God intended. To be clear, I am so not tuned in to any fandom drama or ship wars or whatever. I truly couldn't care less about that. I feel like I'm too old for it, frankly. I actually had to leave the 911 subreddit because in addition to actually annoying fan drama I would see from time to time, even just normal fandom activity on there got to be a little much for me. People are so analytical on Reddit, and I eventually realized that reading so many people's opinions and theories was kind of exhausting, kind of stressful. The final straw for me was when I opened the app one day and the first thing I saw was a post from the 911 subreddit that just said, "You should be ashamed." That's when I was finally like, okay, I'm ready to be done with this. These days, I like to engage with fandom in a light, recreational way. Maybe I'll read some fan fiction, I'll look at some GIFs on Tumblr, but I am not interested in arguing with people or engaging in petty ship wars. So if you're someone who is involved with that stuff and you're wondering why I'm not talking about it or whatever, that's why. I don't care and I don't want to know. So let's start with the textual basis for this ship. Eddie is introduced in season 2, and right off the bat, he's brought in as a sort of foil for Buck. Buck thinks he's hot stuff around the fire station, but he's challenged when a new hot guy comes to town. Interestingly, earlier in the episode, Buck mentions that he's been feeling lonely since Abby left. It almost feels like Eddie is brought in, along with Maddie, to replace Abby's presence in Buck's life. But who could say?
It was getting pretty lonely around here.
When Eddie is introduced, Buck gets extremely hot and bothered, and of course they play this song when Buck first sees him. Buck spends most of the episode jealous of how hot and cool Eddie is, which results in a lot of rivalry and homoerotic staring. But by the end of Eddie's first episode, he and Buck have worked past their differences. If anything, Buck now seems to look at Eddie with bashful admiration. They have this very not gay exchange at the end of the story.
You can have my back any day. Yeah. Or, you could have mine.
Buck also learns that Eddie has a son, and immediately becomes very invested in Eddie's fatherhood and the well-being of him and his kid. Maddie says he has a boy crush on Eddie.
So does this boy crush on Eddie mean that you're finally ready to move on from Abby?
And this episode ends with Buck doing something extremely kind for Eddie by finding childcare for him, despite having only known him for a few weeks. There's this great moment in a later episode where Buck, Eddie, and Chimney are helping Maddie move into her new place, and Maddie remarks on how cute one of Buck's friends is.
He is so cute.
Yeah, he gets that a lot. You should meet his kid, though.
Wait, Chimney has a kid?
Of course, the twist is that she's talking about Chimney, but Buck immediately assumes that she's talking about his beautiful friend Eddie. This is only tangentially related, but later in season 2, Buck gets climactic relationship advice from an elderly gay man who was in a loving gay marriage for many years, which could mean nothing. And at Christmas time, after bringing Christopher to see Santa, an employee mistakes Buck and Eddie for Christopher's parents. Buck doesn't even correct her.
You two have an adorable son.
Thank you.
Which could mean nothing. At the beginning of season 3, when Buck is depressed because he's lost his job due to his leg getting crushed by a fire truck, Eddie tries to cheer him up by bringing Christopher over, because he's their son.
What are you doing here?
He's hanging out with his Buck today. 'Cause I have to go to work today.
Subsequently, there's a very dramatic storyline about Buck taking care of Eddie's son during a tsunami, ending with Eddie continuing to trust Buck with him more than ever, despite Buck almost losing Christopher in the flood.
There's nobody in this world I trust with my son more than you.
Which could mean nothing. When Lena Bosco joins the 118, Buck becomes jealous of her growing close to Eddie. He feels like he's being replaced. At one point in season 3, Buck and Eddie are basically having a date at Buck's place when Buck emotionally tells Eddie that he should have been there for him when he was struggling during Buck's lawsuit.
I should have been there.
And the scene ends weirdly suggestively as Buck propositions a fight.
You're on blood thinners.
Oh, I'd still take you.
You think so?
No. You want to go for the title?
But then it cuts to them playing video games with their son. In the season 3 Christmas episode, Chris asks if he can spend Christmas with Buck, because Buck is his other dad.
Hey, Buck.
Yeah.
Can I spend Christmas with you?
This line.
This is Eddie's house. I'm not really a guest.
When Eddie is swept away by a mudslide while rescuing a child from a well, this show is so funny, Buck becomes extremely distraught.
Eddie! 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 No! Eddie! No! Eddie! No!
I was recently watching a later episode with the friend I mentioned earlier who hadn't seen the whole show, and Eddie referencing this incident led to a really funny out-of-context line for her.
After the last time, when the well collapsed on top of me.
If I were Eddie, I would be constantly peppering that one into my conversations. In season 4, Buck and Eddie continue their weirdly intimate domestic dynamic. Buck frequently babysits Christopher. At one point, when Christopher gets uncomfortable at his own house, he runs away to Buck's house. Late in the season, when the entire 118 are searching for buried treasure hidden by a dead novelist, it's a long story, Eddie asks Buck if he wants to team up. Buck is already teamed up with Taylor, but he immediately lets Eddie in on their deal. Because, while Taylor might be his girlfriend, Eddie is his boyfriend.
This is my boyfriend Derek. This is Derek's boyfriend Ben.
At the end of season 4, Eddie gets shot by a sniper who's targeting firefighters. Again, long story. And this whole shooting sequence is wildly homoerotic. There's a lot of slow motion and intense staring. Buck's covered with Eddie's blood. He uses all his strength to drag him under the fire engine to safety. He's like screaming, crying, throwing up in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
We got
Eddie comes to, and the first thing he asks is if Buck is hurt.
Are you hurt? Firefighter with a gunshot! No, I'm good.
Buck gets extremely emotional when he has to tell Christopher what happened, and when he hears Eddie is safe, he completely breaks down. Christopher has to comfort him. It's wild. Buck starts risking his own life on the job because of the trauma and guilt of what happened. He expresses to Eddie that he thinks he should have been the one to get shot.
I think it might have been better for him if I was the one who got shot.
And finally, this culminates in Eddie revealing to him that he's made Buck Christopher's godfather in his will.
But no one will ever fight for my son as hard as you.
Because Buck thinks he's expendable, but he's wrong.
You act like you're expendable. But you're wrong.
It's crazy how most of the time Eddie comes off as an emotionally stunted idiot with little regard for the feelings of others, especially when it comes to the women he dates, and only when he's with Buck is he able to be a considerate, supportive partner. Eddie has a girlfriend at this point in the show, and we barely see her throughout these episodes. Buck is genuinely framed more like his partner than his actual girlfriend. Then you have season 5, in which Eddie starts having crippling panic attacks because his relationship with a woman is starting to get serious, which could mean nothing. There's this great scene where Buck and Eddie have a big man feelings talk, and Eddie starts the conversation lying prone in this revealing tank top, talking about how hot it is outside.
How are you feeling? Hot. Sweating out of places I didn't know I could.
And as they're talking about Eddie's problems with his girlfriend, Anna, Buck says that he's been Anna and knows what it's like to be in unrequited love.
Eddie, I have been Anna. I know what it's like to be in love with someone who is not all the way in. Deep down, you know it, and it hurts.
I know he's actually referring to his time with Abby, but in this context, it feels like it means something else. When Buck and Eddie are held hostage together at one point this season, Buck is once again extremely concerned for Eddie's well-being. Admittedly, Eddie doesn't really return the favor. There's this part where Buck gets pistol whipped right in front of him, and Eddie barely even blinks. Ryan Guzman, the actor that you aren't. When Eddie is starting to have emotional problems, Buck can tell something's going on and tries to get him to open up in a super platonic way.
Look, man, you don't need to pretend with me.
And when Eddie has his big breakdown, Christopher calls Buck, because of course he does, and subsequently, Buck becomes Eddie's main confidant throughout his mental health journey. He helps him put his room back together, etc. He basically gives Eddie his will to live back at one point.
Whatever happens to him next, you gave him that second chance. Maybe that's the point.
This might be a reach, but toward the end of the season, Ravi has this line where he says having a romantic partner is all about finding someone to have your back.
I mean, isn't that what we all want in a partner? Knowing that they have your back?
And I couldn't help but think back to this exchange.
You can have my back any day. Yeah. Or, you could have mine.
In season 6, Buck has this whole thing where he's looking for more fulfillment in his life. And I didn't mention this earlier, but he frames this by talking about needing a couch.
Taylor moved out 4 months ago, Buck. You could have replaced the couch by now.
Well, maybe I don't want to pick the wrong couch again.
When he and Taylor broke up at the end of season 5, she took the couch, so he's now couchless, and the idea of having or not having a couch becomes a metaphor for his relationship needs throughout the season.
You want to help me pick out a new couch?
Yeah. I think it's supposed to symbolize domestic stability, but he introduces all this while having a little date with Eddie and Christopher. And there's this episode where Buck is recovering from being struck by lightning, and most of his friends and family are smothering him, trying to make sure he's okay. So to escape this, he comes to Eddie's house and immediately falls asleep on Eddie's couch. It's just like, what did they mean by that? I'm not trying to read too much into it, but they told me to pay attention to the idea of a couch as a metaphor for Buck's love life. Also, after Buck's struck by lightning, he develops mysterious math savant powers. It can happen, supposedly.
Did get struck by lightning.
Classic origin story.
But Eddie decides to capitalize on this by taking Buck gambling. And in retrospect, I think this sequence is definitely Buddie fan service. It's an excuse to dress Buck and Eddie up in cute little outfits and give them a fun scene together. Toward the end of the season, Eddie's aunt is trying to set him up on dates with women. And for some reason, Eddie is really uncomfortable with this. He feels like it's a lot of pressure, like he has to perform.
I just hate forced to date. It feels like I have to perform.
You know you're having gay problems when you get the significant look from Hen. Eddie says he just wants chemistry, an easy connection. Why is it that Eddie struggles so much to figure out what he wants from dating? It's probably nothing. In the opener of season 7, Buck reveals that he's newly single. Eddie welcomes him back to the world of the living.
Welcome back to the world of the living, Buck. You were missed.
Eddie's also shirtless for the first half of this conversation. I feel like this actor might have a quota of shirtless appearances per season in his contract or something. When Eddie learns that Christopher is becoming a bit of a player at school, there's a scene implying that he gets this from Buck, because Buck is his other dad.
I don't know where he gets it from. Not from me. I just don't want him to,
end up like me.
And Eddie asks Buck to talk with Chris about it. All of the Bye Buck episode, while ultimately setting up the Buck and Tommy romance, feels like it's about Buck and Eddie. As I mentioned earlier, Buck spends most of the episode pretty clearly jealous of Tommy for getting close to Eddie, not the other way around. Some of these scenes are just ridiculous. There's a homoerotic basketball game where Buck inadvertently injures Eddie out of pure jealous frustration.
Well, you bucked that up, didn't you?
Even when Buck confesses to Tommy that he's been trying to get his attention, even Tommy is like, my attention?
Trying to get your attention has been kind of exhausting. My attention?
Are you sure? Am I crazy? It feels intentional. Maddie even makes this joke at one point.
But now he's going with Tommy. He's got it circled.
Is it circled with a heart around it?
There's a sequence in the Chimney and Maddie wedding episode that reminds me a lot of the poker sequence from season 6. Buck and Eddie put cute little outfits on for the bachelor party and have some fun scenes together where they party and get really drunk. Again, dare I say, obvious fan service. I'm not complaining. They make every other character, including the guy Buck is actually dating, clear out so that it can be the Buck and Eddie show again. One thing about Eddie, he loves a good dress-up moment. In season 2, he randomly pulls out a really high-effort Halloween costume of Snake from Escape from New York. And in season 7, when Buck wants to throw Chimney an 80s-themed bachelor party, Eddie is immediately like, we should do Miami Vice couples costumes.
We should totally go as Crockett and Tubbs.
Absolutely.
I've already said I don't mind Tommy, but I will say it kind of rubbed me the wrong way that he didn't even try to dress up for the 80s-themed bachelor party that Buck was clearly really excited about.
What is this? I told you it's 80s theme.
They had Henleys in the 80s.
You couldn't put in a little effort for the person you supposedly like. Another rare moment where Eddie actually acts like a considerate partner. Too bad he's never able to do that for any of the women he dates. Finally, Buck is the one to find out about Eddie's little affair with Kim, the fake Shannon, and he expresses his concern about it.
I'm worried about you.
Yeah. I'm worried about me too.
And later, when Chris finds out Buck is the person Eddie calls for help, it's so funny. When Eddie calls him over, even Buck is like, I don't know, man. You might have gone too far this time.
Talk to him. I don't know how to explain this.
And when Eddie's parents take Chris away, Buck places a comforting hand on his shoulder. And that's about it for their canon interactions as of now. So I have to be so real with you. Normally, when it comes to popular non-canon ships, like in the past when I was a big Tumblr kid, even if I ship them, I can usually at least understand why the show or franchise in question would not want to make the ship canon. In a lot of the classic big Tumblr ships, like John Locke, Destiel, Steric, Stucky, you can look at those properties and the people and companies who made them and understand, even if it's purely cynical. I think a lot of the time it really comes down to creators feeling resentful of things that they didn't intentionally put in the show getting popular with fans. Like, it's probably frustrating when a non-canon ship gets more popular than the relationships or arcs you actually put into the show on purpose. So I think that's one reason shows like Sherlock or Supernatural were never very interested in caving to shippers. They clearly had some disdain for that sort of fan, if anything. Or in the case of something like a Marvel or Star Wars ship, unfortunately, we know at this point that Disney is just not interested in putting gay main characters in their properties. There's that whole meme of Disney constantly claiming that they've created their first gay character, but somehow it keeps happening over and over again, and it's always some comically minor character who can be easily edited out if necessary. Some of the creators and studios behind these works probably did and maybe still do feel that incorporating a major gay storyline might risk alienating sections of their audiences. So it's cynical, but it's clear that we were never going to get a queer Captain America or Poe Dameron or whatever. What's that tweet about this? Getting queerbaited by the MCU is like losing at chess to a dog. But even outside of that, I can also understand how for some of these shows, it just wouldn't necessarily fit the tone or the intention of the show very well. As much as I was a John Locke shipper as a 13-year-old, and I'll probably always have have a deep-seated grudge against Stephen Moffat, I do think part of why they didn't go for it, in addition to their obvious resentment for the teenage girls who liked their show, was that they just hadn't set out to make a romance or something that would have to deal with the idea of the characters not being straight. I'm not saying it would have been impossible. It would have been nice if they'd had the guts to try it out, but I can understand that that ultimately just wasn't their vision for the show. However, that being said, in the case of 911, I feel differently. I actually cannot see any reason why they shouldn't make this ship canon. Again, on many shows with big shipping fan bases, even if I disagree, I can understand the motivations behind ignoring these things. But in this case, literally what do they have to lose? The show is already extremely silly and over the top, so it's not like it would be too improbable. You're telling me there can be a shark attack on the freeway, a man's head encased in cement in a microwave, a character surviving having rebar through his skull with no long-term consequences, but having the two guys date each other would be a bridge too far? You're telling me Eddie can meet and start courting a woman who happens to look exactly like his dead wife, but having him be into men would be too weird? The show also already has several queer characters. One of them is now Buck, so it's not like they're homophobic or this wouldn't fit into the world of 911. And oh yeah, like I said earlier, Buck and Eddie are the only two main characters who have not been set up with an endgame love interest from the beginning. I mean, this is a big one. They've written themselves into a corner. Buck and Eddie have been playing love interest roulette for the past 6 seasons. At this point, there's not going to be an endgame love interest for either of them that feels satisfying unless it's each other. And finally, they're already co-parenting a child together, so it just feels right. I have always wondered if Buck were to marry someone else, have kids of his own, that would be kind of weird, right? What would become of his relationship with Christopher? Eddie baby-trapped him. The least he could do is make an honest man out of him, which brings me to perhaps the most compelling argument for Buddie canon. That's right, subsection, the Eddie problem. I've already spoken at length about how Eddie is the worst character on this show. It's not his fault, it's the writer's fault. It seems like they just never really had much of a plan for him. Eddie is an incredibly blank slate. 6 seasons into his tenure on the show, we still know almost nothing about who he is as a person, but I believe that this could all change with one simple fix. We have to make Eddie gay. Hear me out. Tim Minear, if you're watching, hear me out. We hardly ever get beneath the surface with Eddie. He's a very reticent character. Like I said, we don't know a lot about him, but if anything, probably the most consistent part of his characterization is that he's repressed. Eddie doesn't like to acknowledge when he has a problem. In season 3, when he's apparently feeling all this emotional turmoil, instead of venting it in a healthy way, he bottles it up until it erupts into intense rage, prompting him to join an illegal fight club. In season 5, as soon as his relationship with Anna gets serious, he immediately has a panic attack so severe that he thinks he's having a heart attack. His response to being told what he experienced was a panic attack? I don't panic.
It's not possible. I don't panic.
It's made clear that he's not actually attracted to Anna, but instead of acknowledging that, he maintains their relationship because he wants Christopher to be happy. In season 5, Eddie leaves the 118 when Christopher tells him that his dangerous job scares him. Eddie starts to show clear signs of being mentally unwell, but instead of acknowledging it at all, he bottles it all up until it erupts into a violent meltdown where he destroys his bedroom and terrifies his son. What was Eddie's response prior to this when asked about his mental health? That's not what's happening here. I'll be fine.
That's not what's happening here. I'll be fine.
Eddie mentions at one point that his old drill sergeant in the army used to say that fear is weakness leaving the body.
An old drill sergeant of mine used to say that pain is nothing but weakness leaving the body.
You think pain is weakness?
It can be.
In an episode where Eddie has a tense visit with his parents, Buck tries to commiserate with him over them both having screwed up families. Eddie's response, "My family's not screwed up."
As someone who also comes from a screwed up family,
My family isn't screwed up.
In season 6, when Eddie's lamenting being set up on a date by his aunt, Hen says that maybe he's anxious. Eddie's response, "Anxious? Who's anxious?"
Or maybe you're just anxious about said performance.
Anxious? Who's anxious?
He says once again, "I do not panic."
I do not panic.
We know at this point that that is patently untrue. In season 7, when Eddie's girlfriend turns out to have studied to be a nun in the past, Eddie freaks out for some reason. When trying to articulate why, he says that he has a reservoir of Catholic guilt lying dormant, just waiting to be activated.
She's got a reservoir of Catholic guilt just lying dormant, waiting to be activated.
Which could mean nothing. Even his affair with Kim, he lets spiral out of control because of his inability to admit he needs help. When Buck finds out about it by chance, Eddie acts like everything's fine and he's got it under control, when that clearly isn't the case.
What's going on here?
Nothing. Nothing's going on.
Eddie also seems to struggle with facing the true nature of his relationship with Shannon. Like I touched on earlier, it's clear from the actual text of the show that their relationship was anything but healthy. But after Shannon's death, whenever Eddie talks about her, he'd have you believe that they were soulmates in a perfectly happy marriage.
I just want what I had when I met Shannon. It just happened. It was magic. There was always a part of me that loved being married to her.
It seems like Eddie has a tendency to repress his true feelings, an inability to acknowledge past or present problems in his life, and an untapped reservoir of Catholic guilt, perhaps exacerbated by his fraught relationship with his father, who apparently pressured him to be the man of the house when Eddie was growing up.
Why don't you tell him about the time you pulled your 10-year-old son aside and told him it was time to step up, be the man of the house?
Eddie had an unplanned baby with the first girl he ever dated and decided to marry her out of obligation. He never really got to explore himself and his identity when he was young. He basically skipped his adolescence and rushed straight into adult responsibilities.
I married the first girl I dated. Think you might mean slept with.
He then joined the army, which no doubt only continued to sap him of any individuality and stress the importance of performative masculinity and suppressing one's more vulnerable emotions.
An old drill sergeant of mine used to say that pain is nothing but weakness leaving the body.
And I can't help but notice that in every relationship he's had since Shannon, he always finds some way to blow it up spectacularly. When things start getting serious with Anna, he literally panics so hard he thinks he's dying. When things start getting serious with Marisol, he's hit by a sudden wave of Catholic guilt and starts a bizarre emotional affair with a doppelganger of his dead wife, his marriage being the only romantic relationship he seems to consider successful in some way.
I guess she was the love of your life.
I think she was.
There's that part in season 6 where he says outright that going on dates with women makes him anxious, makes him feel like he has to perform.
I just hate forced to date. It feels like I have to perform.
I'm just saying, maybe this guy's gay. You know that meme that's like, sometimes a man hurts every woman who enters his life because his true soulmate is a man? Eddie has this line in season 7.
You and Tommy have the right idea. Stay single. Hang out with the boys.
Oh, Eddie. He's so close to getting it. I am a gay Eddie truther. At this point, I actually feel like it might be the only way to salvage Eddie's character and retroactively make all his behavior and hang-ups make sense. And again, I don't think it would be too much or too weird for this show. With all the evidence we've laid out, I think it could genuinely make sense. It would take some skillful writing to tie it all together, but all they have to do is care. For once, if the writers of 911 could just care about Eddie's characterization, we could have something great on our hands. I have a very complex relationship with the character of Eddie because I find his writing so weak and often dislike the person he is in the text on screen, but I love the potential of Eddie, the secret gay version of him that exists in my head. Also, hot take, Eddie has apparently grown a mustache for the next season, and I think the mustache looks great on him. I'm very excited for Season 8 Eddie, who has a mustache. I've seen some fans respond negatively to the mustache, and I think you guys have some growing up to do, honestly. It's giving classically handsome. It's giving old Hollywood, matinee idol, William Powell, Clark Gable, dare I say Omar Sharif. It's bringing out his big, beautiful eyes. I think everyone capable of growing a mustache should grow a mustache. If I could grow a mustache, I would. I really hope this isn't a situation where Eddie has the mustache for like one episode before shaving it off. I want it around. Indefinitely. So there you have it. My case for Buddie. I'm actually shocked that that didn't take longer. Tim, if you're still watching, I hope you've been taking notes. I originally had this section around the middle of the video, but I decided to move it to the end. This is really the ultimate thing I have to say about 911. It's conclusive. I think it contextualizes everything that came before. Thus then did they celebrate the funeral of this video. Detailer of 911 opinions. Referencing the Iliad was a late decision because I wasn't sure how to wrap up my network TV rant at the beginning until I decided to call it an invocation, after which I thought it made sense to bookend that. But it's funny when you consider that one of the only elements of the film The Boy Next Door with any enduring cultural relevance is the moment when Ryan Guzman's character gives J-Lo's character a first edition copy of the Iliad.
Oh my god, this is a first edition?
Perfect movie. This video got a little longer than I had hoped it would be, but I hope all of you long-form TV show deep dive enjoyers get a kick out of it. Moral of the story, I guess, I love 911. I have loved it for a while, and I hope to keep loving it for as long as it's on the air. This has been an interesting video to make because I've never covered a TV show that's still actively airing. There's something kind of scary about that. What if everything I said or complained about in this video is completely refuted by the next season of the show? When more of the show airs, will I feel like I need to make more 911 content to gain closure? I just don't know. I've actually been thinking of starting a 911 podcast with my good online friend, fellow YouTube creator Ryan Kearns. Actually, while getting back into 911 this year, I didn't have anyone in my life who watched the show, but then I saw Ryan posting about it, and although we had barely ever talked before, I messaged him like, do you want to talk about 911? And we've kind of been fandom buddies ever since. Buddy fandom buddies, you could say. He would definitely be in the special thanks for this video. I first vented a lot of these thoughts to him in our Twitter DMs. And we were thinking it might be fun to start some kind of recap podcast. It doesn't seem like one exists yet, and we love talking about this show. So stay tuned if you're interested. I'm trying to make that happen. If you liked this video, I would really appreciate it if you considered subscribing to my Patreon. It's the most direct way to support me, and there's bonus content on there, extra stuff from some of my existing videos, some standalone bonus videos. It's a fun time. Now that I'm finally done with my Teen Wolf series and my Wrong video and this 911 video, all of which I had been planning for a long time, I'm actually thinking of taking a little step back for a while to dedicate some time to my non-YouTube writing. We'll see if that actually pans out, but during that time, I'm planning to focus mainly on the Patreon. My next project I have planned for them is to review this gay supernatural drama from the 2000s called Dante's Cove. I happened upon it a couple months ago and thought it was so weird and special, so that would be a Patreon exclusive if that sounds good to you. Thanks for watching. Look out for exploding fire engines and pianos falling from the sky and B-nados and such. Stream Step Up All In, stream The Boy Next Door. Let's make Ryan Guzman receive some confusing residual checks in the mail this month. Tim Minear, if you're still watching, can I write for your show? Please answer me yes or no in the comments. If you don't leave a comment, I'll just assume the answer is yes.
I just want to say how much we've enjoyed being a part of this contest. And it's been a life-changing ride. And to be going up against the Grim Knights, what an honor. And what a compelling storyline. It's gonna make for some killer TV.